Chapter 1423. She was really addicted to cosplay. Poplar Fruit was speechless as he looked at the costume that was obviously from the Qing dynasty. Of course, he didn't know that the next 2 or 3 days would be cosplay. Poplar Fruit almost spat out blood. Can't you come up with something new? Early the next morning, Poplar Fruit and his daughter dressed up. Young Guo was wearing a plain mandarin jacket and linen trousers. Although he was carrying a small bag and his outfit was very rustic, when he wore it on the tall Yang Guo, he looked like a well-hidden, of course, it could be seen at a glance, martial arts expert. Kiki was wearing a Manchurian Qing dynasty dress. Of course, the color was not very bright. She was wearing a navy blue low-collared gown with white cuffs and a cyan satin skirt. The simple and plain clothes matched the little girl's extraordinary face. She was like a Chinese Manchurian Qing version of Cinderella. Why don't you dress like a princess this time? I like to wear a princess dress. The little girl put on her clothes, bounced on the sofa, and said to her father with a smile. She mischievously said a few words, but her tone didn't mean that she wanted to wear a princess dress. Who said you're not like a princess? You're a princess. Poplar Fruit said to his daughter with a smile. Do you still remember the story of Little Swallow? You're the little princess who lived among the common people. Oh, I remember. When Kiki and her father went back to their hometown, they watched the antique costume TV series, Princess Pearl, with their grandparents. Although they didn't finish watching it and only watched a few episodes, she still knew the identity of Little Swallow. Then Papa, are you the emperor? Poplar Fruit grinned and said, yes, but Papa can't reveal his identity now. You see, Papa and you can only wear such clothes. We have to keep a low profile. So, we're on a very mysterious mission? The little girl held her small face in surprise, but then looked around, afraid of being heard, so she asked in a low voice. That's right. Poplar Fruit gave him a thumbs up. After he finished packing, he picked up the luggage prepared by Feng Beibei. Feng Beibei had already gone to class, so he was alone. He brought his daughter and ran towards the so-called Gate of Time. In the end, he was told that the Gate of Time was in the famous film city in Jiangnan. Alright, the production crew really liked to torment people. They actually had to wear such clothes. First, they had to take the subway to the airport. Then, they had to wear such clothes and take the plane to Jiangnan. Poplar Fruit felt like he was going to be laughed at on the way there. Holding his daughter's hand, Poplar Fruit embarked on the journey of being watched slowly. They hadn't even left the neighborhood yet. On the way, they were spotted by a few neighbors. They were fine as they were all people of status and quality. They waved their hands to greet them, then hid to the side. They didn't make a sound and only mouthed, "Are you recording where Daddy is going?" Poplar Fruit smiled and nodded at them and waved his hand. But when they were outside, Yanghua could no longer be the center of attention, especially in the crowded subway in Yangcheng. Along the way, many people were looking at Poplar Fruit and Kiki. Many people were able to quickly identify Poplar Fruit and Kiki. Most of them were fine, as they took out their phones and secretly took photos from afar. A few were very bold and ran over to Poplar Fruit to ask for his autograph. Hey, you see, I am not a singer nor an actor. I am also not a big star. Why do you want my autograph? Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. He handed Kiki over to the staff to help take care of her. Although he said that, he didn't put on airs. He still took my daughter's notebook and seriously signed his name on it. He had even used the clerical calligraphy that he had learned from his professor when he was studying for his Ph.D. in the Chinese department. The strokes were firm and beautiful. Of course, it was also very slow. Otherwise, Poplar Fruit's hands would have been tired from signing autographs on the subway. On the subway, some fans couldn't wait to get off. In the end, a few my daughter who had nothing to do escorted Poplar Fruit and Kiki to the airport. You have to study hard. Poplar Fruit and Kiki said goodbye to the group of fans. Kiki also waved her hand obediently and said sweetly, "Goodbye, sister." Poplar Fruit dressed up like this and still managed to get on the plane. It seemed that the program team put in a lot of effort. After getting on the plane, Poplar Fruit was still surrounded by onlookers, but it was much better than on the subway. Kiki didn't have to hide behind her father shyly. Finally, Poplar Fruit and the others arrived at the film city. The car passed through one imitation building after another, and finally arrived at the super-huge Ming and Qing palace. Poplar Fruit held his daughter's hand and walked in. He introduced to his daughter. It is said that this is an imitation of the Forbidden City. Except for the antiques, everything else is exactly the same as the real one. What do you mean by one-to-one? Kiki was very smart, but Poplar Fruit didn't let the little girl come in contact with too much knowledge beyond her level. It means that it looks the same as it did before. Poplar Fruit said with a smile. You've been to the Forbidden City before. Don't you think it's as big as the Forbidden City? Yes, it's super huge. Kiki kept looking left and right, and her eyes couldn't stop looking. She suddenly shouted as if she had discovered a new continent. Papa, look, the village chief. I see the village chief. Poplar Fruit and Kiki were the first to arrive, so they were the first to greet the village chief, who had become uniquely. However, before they could say anything to the village chief, the other children also arrived. The second to arrive was the cold and aloof Kong Kong. He wore an official's robe and walked over proudly with Hu Jun, who had been reduced to a guard with a sword. Kiki ran over happily and wanted to hold brother Kong Kong's hand. However, Kong Kong ignored her coldly and had a mysterious smile on his face. However, Kiki didn't want to be spoiled by brother Kong Kong's coldness. The little girl's strength was there, so when she reached out to grab his hand, Kong Kong could only obediently let her hold his hand. The little girl didn't take this half-forced, half-pushed hand-holding seriously. She smiled and pulled brother Kong Kong's hand, wanting to walk forward together. Of course, Kong Kong refused in his heart. However, before he could resist, another child came. Furthermore, it was Kiki's other good friend, Nuo. Chi-Chi was overjoyed as she released big brother Kong Kong's hand. Pulling her skirt, she jogged away, leaving Chairman Kong Kong alone in the wind. The other children arrived one after another. Nuo Yi, who became the little Ah brother, Xian Xian, who became the crown prince, and De Jun, who became a pitiful beggar. However, the situation wasn't as happy as the children imagined. The moment it started, the situation took a turn for the worse. Suddenly, a group of aggressive imperial guards came and directly pressed Poplar Fruit to the ground. With a snap, shackles were put on him. Chapter 1424. Sweat. What's going on? Poplar Fruit knew the person in the lead. He was Cheonjuan. Don't be fooled by the fact that he was tall, dressed like Hu Jun, and mixed in with a group of bodyguards. Yanghua, who was caught, raised his head and saw Cheonjuan looking at him with a smile in his eyes. Kiki, who just ran to the village head's side, was a little confused. She didn't know what was going on. She thought it was a joke. Take him away. Cheonjuan roared. A group of extras dragged Poplar Fruit outside. Poplar Fruit saw Cheonjuan winking at him. Naturally, he knew that the program crew was tormenting him. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry and shook his head. He pretended to struggle desperately, but he didn't use any strength. Instead, he followed the footsteps of the people who were grabbing him. Help, help me, I'm innocent. Why did you catch me? Poplar Fruit's shouts were very effective. His sorrowful voice made people feel a little sorry for him. At this time, Kiki finally reacted. The little girl pouted, lifted her skirt, and quickly ran over. Halfway, she was intercepted by Cheonjuan. Kiki waved her little fist and hit Cheonjuan's stomach. Her eyes began to turn red, and her voice was a little choked as she said, "Let go of my papa. Don't catch my papa." Fortunately, Cheonjuan was trained. Otherwise, if his stomach was hammered by Kiki's little hand, even an adult wouldn't be able to withstand it. Kiki was very strong. We caught him because he committed a crime. Cheonjuan saw that his little niece was about to cry, and his heart didn't feel good. However, he could only hold back his laughter and said seriously, "Kiki, I didn't do anything. Save me." Poplar Fruit looked at his daughter pitifully. He finally understood why he was dressed so plainly. It turned out that he was used to be caught. "My papa is a good person. You got the wrong person." When Kiki heard her father's words, she immediately struggled. The little girl's eyes were filled with tears. She really wanted to save her father. "Kiki, let us help you." At this time, Kong Kong, who was wearing an official's uniform, and the beggar, De Jun, who was carrying a dog-beating stick, swaggered over. "Kiki, Tell them that I didn't do anything wrong, that I'm a good person. Poplar Fruit shouted pitifully as he knelt on the ground while being surrounded by a group of people. I told you, but it's useless. Chi-Chi was blocked by Cheonjuan, so she didn't recognize Cheonjuan, who had changed his clothes for a moment. Pleading for leniency was useless, and his martial prowess was too weak. The little girl cried until her eyes were full of tears. She clutched her hands, looking very pitiful. Did you wet your pants last night? Kong Kong didn't seem to be here to save people. He seemed to be here to tear down the stage. Although he was cold, his words were shocking, but they seemed to be very harmonious. Cheonjuan, this guy, could actually keep a straight face. After hearing Kong Kong's words, he seemed to ponder for a moment and said seriously, "Yes, he wet his pants last night." "I didn't wet my pants." Poplar Fruit was so angry that he laughed. Cheonjuan, this guy, actually said that he wet his pants. But it seemed to be quite effective. Although it caused the adults to laugh, it was obvious that the few children were scared. Those who wet their pants will be taken away. Cheonjuan let go of the frightened Kiki and let her stand with her friends. He returned to the middle of the group, waved his hand, and said in a loud voice, "Poplar Fruit also had fun." Scenes from the previous episodes flashed through his mind. He saw Poplar Fruit struggling to be taken away, and then suddenly shouted, "Xian, you have to be careful too." On the other side, Crown Prince Xian indeed became nervous. He cried as he pulled his father's hand and said anxiously, "Woo, I don't want." But under Kiki's sad and pitiful little eyes, Poplar Fruit was taken away by a group of side guards and Cheonjuan. The little girl was left standing alone in the wide square, wiping her tears. Fortunately, there was a group of uncles asking the village chief how to save her father. The helpless little girl looked at the village chief pitifully. On the other side, after Poplar Fruit and Cheonjuan left Kiki's sight, the side guards let go of their hands. Cheonjuan also smiled and patted Poplar Fruit's shoulders and knees, but had no intention of releasing Poplar Fruit's shackles. "Poplar Fruit, I'm sorry. This is the request of the program team. They suddenly caught me for no reason, sigh." Poplar Fruit of course did not care. He smiled and said, "They almost scared me." Fortunately, he did not start fighting. Otherwise, with his skills, even if Cheonjuan was in front of him, these side guards would not be enough. "You're lucky," Cheonjuan said with a smile. "I just heard the director say that beggars are not allowed to enter the palace. Teacher Lin and the others will be kicked out later." Without saying much, they came to the front of the dungeon. Poplar Fruit received Cheonjuan's explanation of the next part of the script. Someone went out to take a look and suddenly ran back. She's here. Kiki is here." Several guards quickly supported Poplar Fruit and made him kneel on the ground. Poplar Fruit stretched his neck, and then Cheonjuan pulled out a long knife and waved it on Poplar Fruit's neck. "She's here." Kiki appeared at the door. "Don't cut off my head. I really didn't wet the bed yesterday." Poplar Fruit cried. No, don't kill my papa." Kiki cried until her eyes were blurred. She ran over, but when she saw that her father was about to die, she hurriedly lifted her skirt and rushed over. She hugged her father, who was still shackled, and pitifully turned her head to look at the bad guy with the knife. Poplar Fruit felt the cold tears on his daughter's face. He couldn't bear it, but this play still had to go on. Cheonjuan threw the knife away. According to the script, he let go of his indifference, squatted down, gently held Kiki's waist and said, "Oh, such a lovely girl. Why are you crying? Are you acting in a play?" But Kiki didn't know. She thought that she still had a little use. The little girl wiped her tears with both hands and cried, "Please let my papa go, okay? My papa is a good person, really." "But he wet the bed," Cheonjuan explained. "My papa didn't wet the bed. He really didn't wet the bed." Kiki cried. "How do you know he didn't wet the bed?" Cheonjuan asked. Because maybe I wet the bed." Kiki cried and said in fear, "My papa won't wet the bed." "You wet the bed." Cheonjuan pretended to be surprised. But I haven't wet the bed for a long time." Kiki wiped her tears and said miserably, "If it was you, then I would have arrested you." Cheonjuan deliberately rubbed his chin and asked, "Did I really catch the wrong person?" Chapter 1425. Cheon-juan was really too much. Why did he have to make such a lovely girl cry? God knows how many viewers behind the screen were going to fight for justice for Chi-Chi. Seeing Kiki crying even more sadly, Poplar Fruit quickly made up a melodramatic plot. No, my daughter didn't wet the bed. If you want to arrest someone, arrest me. Papa. Kiki didn't know if she was moved or scared. She cried and hugged her father, holding her father's hand, as if she was worried that her father would leave. At this time, Cheon-juan also felt that he had attracted too much hatred. He didn't dare to play the cold guard captain anymore. He half-squatted and said to Kiki, "Tell uncle the truth. Was it you or your father who wet the bed?" I didn't wet the bed, and then my papa also didn't wet the bed." The little girl sobbed and said, "Can you let go of my papa?" "Not yet. We haven't found out who wet the bed, so we can't let him go." Cheon-juan saw that Kiki was about to cry again, so he quickly added, "But I can spare his life. Come on, take Poplar Fruit to the prison and wait for the trial." And so Chi-Chi watched tearfully as her father was escorted into the dark prison. "Kiki, save Dad." Although Poplar Fruit was locked in the prison, he still shouted loudly, "It's okay, don't cry." Cheon-juan seemed to no longer be the guard captain, but a caring big brother, and said, "He's okay, we'll give you an answer after the investigation." But I don't want my papa to be locked up." The little girl's face was full of tears. She grabbed a tissue and cried. "You don't have to worry about him. He's very comfortable in there." Cheon-juan said, "Listen, he said it's like a hotel, la 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 la." As soon as Cheon-juan spoke, Poplar Fruit's shouts came from the small prison. "Kiki, come and save me. I don't want to stay here. There are rats in here. It's so scary." Poplar Fruit was also good at pretending. There were no rats in the prison. The prison was divided into several cells. There was only one cellmate in his cell. Although his hair was a little long and his clothes were a little tattered, he was still very clean. He even greeted him as soon as he came in. To cover up his lie, Cheon-juan purposely squeaked to cover up Poplar Fruit's voice. Then he said, "Look at how happy your father is." Kiki was a little confused. She looked at Cheon-juan innocently and pouted. "But I heard everything." At this time, Kiki suddenly felt that Cheon-juan looked familiar. She frowned slightly and wiped away her tears. She stared at Cheon-juan with her reddened eyes, which made Cheon-juan a little flustered. "I know." Kiki suddenly pouted and said angrily, "I know your Uncle Che." Cheon-juan panicked. He didn't expect Kiki to find out at this time. He was a little hesitant. But Uncle Che, why did you catch my papa? Aren't you good friends?" Kiki asked while sobbing. Looking at the little girl's big tearful eyes, Cheon-juan suddenly felt that he was the biggest sinner in the world. Cheon-juan coughed and took a tissue to wipe Kiki's tears. "Kiki, you're mistaken. I'm bodyguard Che, not your Uncle Che." But you look like him. And your voice is also very similar." Kiki sobbed and said, "Uncle Che, can you let go of my papa? I beg you." Ouch. Cheon-juan had a headache. He hesitated and said, "Actually, I just look like your Uncle Che." "I'm not your Uncle Che. How about this? Don't cry. Uncle Che, no, bodyguard Che will go with you to see your papa. Let's see if there's any way to save your father, okay?" Kiki's eyes immediately lit up. She nodded her head hopefully. Just as they entered the prison, the prisoners in the cell next to them stretched out their black hands, howled, and made a terrifying sound. Kiki was so scared that she turned around and ran away. Cheon-juan also quickly chased after her. "Kiki, what's wrong with you?" "I'm scared." You tell them not to stretch out their hands. Then don't talk." The little girl was so scared that she was about to cry. She said while choking with sobs. The little girl's appearance was really serious. She made a request to the bodyguard captain. Then, not only the audience, but even Cheon-juan couldn't help but look up to the sky and grin when Kiki wasn't looking. Kiki, don't ignore me. Come and save me. Father wants to see you." The moment Yonggwa saw his daughter running away with her hair, he started to shout again. Of course, the cellmate next to him also asked questions randomly. Poplar Fruit casually answered 2 of his questions, but it attracted more questions. This must be the program group's plan. Poplar Fruit suddenly thought of Tang Sanzang, played by Luo Jiaoying. At this time, hearing her father's call, Kiki finally plucked up the courage to go to the prison cell to see her father. When she overcame her fear, the little girl found that the terrible black hands were gone. Of course they were gone. They were still quarreling. How could the program be recorded? Suddenly, there was a riot. Che and Juan's hands were caught by Poplar Fruit's cellmate. Of course, Poplar Fruit also helped. He pulled Che and Juan's sleeves and tied a knot. However, this cellmate was actually unreliable. After he tied the knot, he laughed and teased Kiki. "Please let my papa out, okay?" Kiki begged pitifully. She found that this grandfather with messy hair seemed to be the most powerful person. "Then you have to answer my question. Do you like your father?" The cellmate began to steal the show. "Yes, I do. Can you give me the key?" Kiki looked at him expectantly. The others didn't say anything. They just watched with a smile. This must be good material. "Yes, but you have to go back to my question. Do you like your mother?" "I like her too. Can you give me the key? Please, my papa really didn't wet the bed." Kiki begged pitifully. "But you have to answer my question first. Do you like your father or your mother more?" He really had a lot of questions. Poplar Fruit had tried before. "I like both." Kiki was not fooled. "Can you give it to me? You are a good person." "Ahem, one more question. Who is your mother's father's daughter's daughter?" This walk-on actor actually asked a long series of tongue-twisting questions. Even the audience couldn't react in time. But Poplar Fruit snickered in his heart. "Testing my daughter? You really haven't seen the genius of the Yang family." "That's me." Sure enough, Kiki answered without hesitation. Chapter 1426. The little girl's pure heart made people have a whole new level of respect for her. And that Tang Sanzang inmate was still there deceiving Kiki to let Kiki answer more questions. It was believed that at this time, many of the audience had a face full of smiles, and then clenched their fists, wanting to jump into the screen and beat him up. Poplar Fruit also couldn't stand it anymore. He coughed twice and said, "Kiki, don't be fooled by him. If he had the key, he would have already gotten out. Otherwise, why would he be locked up here with Dad?" The little girl was stunned for a moment, and then turned to look at Che and Juan, who had already taken the opportunity to break free. She put her palms together, very pitifully looked at Che and Juan and said, "Uncle Che, I beg you, let go of my dad, okay?" "Cough, I'm not your Uncle Che." Che and Juan of course couldn't be cold to the little girl. He squatted down and softly said to Kiki, "Well, if you perform well, your dad can be released sooner." "Then what should I do?" Kiki asked nervously. "Let's go, let's talk outside." Che and Juan picked up Kiki. "Kiki, you have to work hard, perform well, and get Dad out of here as soon as possible." Poplar Fruit grabbed the cell door and tried his best to act. "I know." The little girl also waved at her father, her little face full of determination. Outside the door, Che and Juan put down Kiki. He was very gentle. After all, they were acquaintances, and Che and Juan also watched Kiki grow up. That year, they even made an unexpected micro-movie together. "Kiki, you have to take my saber and stand here." Che and Juan looked at his little niece as if he was looking at his own daughter, full of love, but he couldn't let Kiki feel that he was too friendly, otherwise he wouldn't be able to continue the act later. Kiki took the saber, and obediently stood at the door of the prison with the two guards in yellow jackets. But she was looking at Che and Juan suspiciously. "What are you looking at me for?" Che and Juan couldn't help but ask. "I feel like you're my Uncle Che," the little girl muttered. "My Uncle Che also hugged me like you." The little girl was very smart. Che and Juan's face was covered in sweat. He had been squatting all this time, maintaining a height that was not too different from Chi-Chi's. He smiled and said, "All right, let's not care about whether Uncle Che is Uncle Che or not. You need to stand guard obediently and not let the bad guys in. This way your father will be released sooner." "I will be very obedient." The little girl stood upright with her saber in one hand. She looked very valiant, just like the military posture she had learned during military training. "Kiki, you're the best." Che and Juan smiled. He was no longer as majestic as before. Instead, he had become Kiki's sidekick. He pulled a long face and said, "Are you thirsty?" Shall I get you a drink? Sure. I want to drink it. The little girl nodded and said. She didn't seem to be so scary now. The smart little girl began to figure out something. Che and Juan eagerly brought it to Kiki, and even helped her insert the straw. This attentive performance made the fans who had turned into haters start to change their minds. It seems that he's not that bad. Kiki sucked on the cuckoo star while looking at Che and Juan with her beautiful black pearl-like eyes. She said, Uncle Che, can you also give this milk to my papa to drink? I'm afraid that he's thirsty. He was injured before, and he just recovered. Okay. No problem. Che and Juan quickly ran in with a bottle of milk, and handed it to Poplar Fruit, who was being tortured by his long-winded cellmate. He casually said, Your daughter gave it to me. Then he ran out. This guy, if he got married and had children, he would definitely be a child slave. His concern and love for Kiki were all expressed on his face. When he came back, he faced Kiki, who was rolling her eyes and staring at him. Why do you keep looking at me like this? Che and Juan touched his face and asked. Your Uncle Che. Kiki pouted her small mouth and unhappily said. Just now you said yes. Che and Juan thought for a moment, and realized that he was careless just now and stepped into Kiki's trap. He blushed with shame and reached out to touch Kiki's cute little head with 2 pigtails. He smiled and said, Okay, I admit, I'm your Uncle Che. Then why did you catch my papa? You're still lying. The little girl angrily asked. Looking at her pure eyes, even if she knew that he was acting, Che and Juan suddenly felt a sense of guilt flooding over him like a mountain and a sea. It's my fault. It's my fault. Che and Juan raised his hands and feet and said, Okay, I'll be honest. Uncle Che was actually carrying out a mission in the game. Just like your father. Your father was locked up. This is the requirement of the game. It needs you to work hard and then let your father out. Che and Juan said. Then I've been very obedient. Can you let go of my papa? Kiki put on a pitiful look and said to Che and Juan. You and my papa are good friends. Can you let him go? Che and Juan was about to say something when suddenly, a group of people came over. The palace maids chattered noisily as they swarmed around him. The scale was huge. The person in the lead had an outstanding temperament, and was dressed like a graceful and rich empress. The audience who often watched TV series immediately recognized her. Isn't this Ning Jin? That year, Sunny Days made her famous. Then she starred in The New Beach with Lu Tianwang and her brother. She also starred in movies like Gun Hunt, Love Call Shift, Founding a Nation, and so on. She was definitely a veteran actor that everyone was familiar with. Of course, Ning Jin was also brought here by another veteran actor, Lin Yongjian. Seeing Ning Jin, Che and Juan hurriedly ran up according to the script, knelt down, and said in a particularly flattering voice, Oh, Imperial Concubine Ning, you came? Kiki was a bit confused. This new Imperial Concubine Ning was someone that Kiki had never seen before. She foolishly grabbed Che and Juan's sword and stood at the door at a loss. What a lovely girl. Half of Ning Jin's acting, half of Ning Jin really liked her. She squatted down and sweetly held Kiki's hand and asked, Can you tell Imperial Concubine Ning what's your name? After talking for a while, Kiki, who felt that a great person had come, began to beg pitifully. Imperial Concubine Ning, can you please let my father go? Imperial Concubine Ning brought Kiki to Poplar Fruit. When Poplar Fruit saw a newcomer, he quickly ran to the prison door to ask for help. It's not impossible to let you go. Ning Jin pinched his orchid fingers and said in a tired voice, But our family doesn't have such a big power. I'll bring your daughter into the palace. Whether you can come out or not, it depends on your daughter's performance. Chapter 1427. Kiki had been abducted by Ning Jin, but Poplar Fruit was not afraid. Although it was the first time they met, Ning Jin knew how much he liked Kiki when he saw her beaming with joy. But after his daughter left, Poplar Fruit could only stay alone in the prison. Actually, there was no problem staying in the prison. The bed was clean, and it was quite comfortable to lie down. There was no need to rush the filming. But how could there be such a good thing? Poplar Fruit had just sat down when he saw the long-haired extras grinning and coming over. Hey, can you chat with me for a while? I've been locked up for decades, and no one has ever chatted with me. Poplar Fruit rolled his eyes and looked helplessly at the guy who had been chatting with him for half an hour. He didn't know where the program team found this weirdo, but he could talk for half a day and not repeat the same thing. But the main thing was that the topics he talked about were very common and boring. Poplar Fruit felt that his IQ would be lowered by chatting with such a guy. Right IQ. Poplar Fruit looked at the other party with an evil smile. He put his hands on the shoulders of the Tang Sanzang cellmate and said, "How about this? Since it's boring anyway, it's better to learn than to chat. In the future, when you get out, you can have another skill to make a living. Let's learn Hindi." Coincidentally, Poplar Fruit had recently been arranging Hindi as a minor course for students. Hindi was relatively popular because domestic manufacturers had recently begun to plan for Hindi and Africa. Learning Hindi would definitely be of great help to them in finding jobs in the future. Tang Sanzang was dumbfounded. He looked at Poplar Fruit with a confused expression. Poplar Fruit saw this and was secretly happy. He said, "No. Learn well. Today, let's talk about the branches and origins of Hindi and its development in modern times." While the other party was in a daze, Poplar Fruit began his lecture. This was actually a lesson that Poplar Fruit had prepared for himself. Although it hadn't started yet, he had already prepared a draft in advance. If it was Poplar Fruit's own student, not many people would make a fuss. But this was the first time the Tang Sanzang cellmate and the national audience had seen Poplar Fruit teach with their own eyes. Although the sudden change in style made people laugh, Poplar Fruit's completely unscripted class made everyone, including the cameraman, speechless. Looking at Poplar Fruit's appearance, he was the real chatterbox. He was able to talk nonstop for half a day, unlike the walk-on Tang Sanzang, who only spoke nonsense. Yanggua's words had substance, and he quoted from many sources. He even used small stories from Hindi to make the audience indulge in it. Although this scene was not kept in the program later released an hour-long behind-the-scenes video that recorded Poplar Fruit's lecture to his cellmate. These were all very basic lessons. Even people who had a little foundation in Hindi could understand them. Not to mention Tang Sanzang's cellmate, even the walk-ons in the cells outside were leaning on the door and listening with great interest. Poplar Fruit's teaching video was confirmed by the students. It was indeed the same content as his usual classes in school. Poplar Fruit's teaching was also widely praised by the audience and students. It could be said that the number of people who listened in on Poplar Fruit's class often exceeded the number of students who chose his class. Of course, there was a high turnover of audit students. When Poplar Fruit's class became more in-depth, most of the audit students who just wanted to join in the fun would gradually give up. However, the netizens on the internet were very vocal. Poplar Fruit was even called the Yuan Tingfei of the language world. Everyone wanted someone to record more of Poplar Fruit's teaching videos and put them on the internet. After a discussion among the leaders of Higashiyama University, they decided to send a professional cameraman to record Poplar Fruit's class and make it into a public class video for the netizens to learn from. This was not because Higashiyama University was generous, but because recording such a basic level of public class would not make Higashiyama University lose much. On the contrary, it could increase the fame of Higashiyama University. Moreover, they were still holding back. In the future, there might be a lot of talented students who would come to Higashiyama University to learn from Poplar Fruit after learning the basic courses online. In fact, the impact of this matter was far more than that. Next year, after Poplar Fruit obtained the status of professor, the Science and Education channel of CCTV would come and invite Poplar Fruit to participate in the lecture room. It would even give a new lease of life to this science and education program that had been going on for 15 years. Of course, this was something that would happen in the future. Back in reality, Kiki, who had left her father's side with concubine Ning, was brought to the palace. Together with the Crown Prince Xianxian and the general's son Nuoi, they learned ancient court etiquette. It could be seen that concubine Ning liked children very much. Whether it was the smart and cute Kiki, the clumsy and adorable Xianxian, or the silly and sweet Nuoi, they could all make concubine Ning, who had previously shown excellent palace drama acting skills, laugh like a child. Ning Jin taught the three children little by little what to do when paying respects, and what to kowtow to them. He was also very careful. Although he would raise his face from time to scare the three little guys, Ningjin was secretly laughing behind them. Next, Ningjin took out a pair of unique shoes. The soles of the shoes were high, like a pair of delicate women's shoes stepping on a square stone. This was a kind of shoes that the palace maids of the Qing dynasty wore called flowerpot soles. Compared to high heels, the flowerpot soles were more balanced and didn't need to stand as hard as standing on tiptoes. It feels weird. After Kiki put it on, she suddenly grew 10 centimeters taller. Not only did her field of vision widen, but she also felt like she was riding on clouds. But from the audience's point of view, the little girl seemed to have grown up again. Before, she still had the appearance of a child. Now that she had changed into the exquisite robes of the palace, she had become so thin and tall. Moreover, her small face was so delicate that it was not inferior to a young girl's. It had to be said that Kiki now looked like a 15 or 16-year-old little beauty. Come on, take 2 steps. Take it slow. That's right. Ningjin smiled until her eyes were curved. She bent down and supported Kiki with her hands, letting her walk in the tall flowerpot soles. Although Chi-Chi wasn't used to walking like she was walking on stilts, her excellent balance was on full display. She didn't waste too much time, and very soon she was able to walk very smoothly. Now I'll teach you the rules of walking in the palace. The first to walk on the stage was Xian Xian and Nuoi. The 2 little guys were a little nervous when facing concubine Ning, who was not kind. Xian Xian even walked with the same pace. "Io, I'm dying of laughter." Concubine Ning couldn't help but cover her mouth and snicker. However, she didn't make things difficult for the 2 children. Instead, she praised and encouraged them. Now it was Kiki's turn. Chapter 1428. Some people described that ancient beauties walked like willow branches dancing in the spring breeze, bending their slender waists to take small steps, showing their white wrists under the light muslin. This was probably the image of Kiki walking on Shanshan when she was wearing the ancient high-heeled shoes at the bottom of a flower pot. It was really beautiful. At that moment, whether the camera was from the front, the back, or the side, there was almost no blind angle for 365 days, making people intoxicated. Kiki was not as nervous as Xian and the others. This might be because she was a little familiar with Ningjin, or it might be because the little girl was more open-minded, and her sense of balance was very good. When she walked, she didn't need to lower her head and bend down to prevent herself from falling. Just like when she walked, the little girl's posture was tall and straight, and her steps were natural. She held the silk scarf with both hands and gently swayed it as Ningjin had just demonstrated. Although her little face was still slightly tense and a little nervous, it seemed that the little girl who liked the training naturally had a sweet smile on her face. "Oh, very, very good." Ningjin clapped her hands and gave Kiki a thumbs up. She was also amazed. Ningjin's many years of acting experience in movies and TV shows allowed her to cultivate a casual and freehand ancient style of walking, and her every move, every word, and every smile looked very natural. Especially the provocative look in her eyes, which made her look like a cunning fox who was full of attack power. But Kiki was different. She was more like a young and ignorant little princess. Her behavior was elegant and tranquil. Her smile could topple a city, and her smile could topple a country. Just like the sunny summer, her smile had turned into a tranquil pool of water in the West Lake. The learning only lasted for a while. The children were brought in front of the emperor, and there was another round of etiquette demonstration. Zhou Shimin, who played the emperor, was overwhelmed. Zhou Shimin didn't put on the airs of the emperor. He also slowly knelt down and kowtowed with them. "Papa Xian, they said you are the emperor. You are very powerful. Can you let go of my papa?" When she arrived at the emperor's place, Chi-Chi, who had just adjusted her mood, didn't forget her father. She had been working very hard to complete the requests that imperial concubine Ning had given her. Only then did Chi-Chi dare to ask for the emperor's help. "Can you let go of my papa? I can guarantee that my papa didn't wet the bed." What Chi-Chi didn't know was that even Zhou Shimin, who was acting, couldn't help but chuckle when she said this joke out loud. How could this child be so honest? Even until now, he still didn't know that it was just an excuse that Cheon-juan casually seized upon. Poor poplar fruit. He was tricked by his good friend. It was already halfway through the episode, but he was still drowning in the abyss of bedwetting. Of course, Kiki was very anxious. She looked at Zhou Shimin pitifully, hoping to get some good news from the familiar Uncle Zhou Shimin. Ahem. Sure. In view of Yang Luoqi's outstanding performance, you, go release her father, poplar fruit. Zhou Shimin waved his hand and said in a very dignified manner. For the time being, ignoring poplar fruit, who could escape from prison and then catch up with Cheon-juan, Zhou Shimin took the smiling Kiki, his son, and a large group of children to eat lunch. It was a very sumptuous Manchu-Han imperial feast. As soon as Xian came up, he rushed to the roasted duck leg. But when he touched it, he found that it was actually fake. Then, everyone sat in front of the beautiful but inedible banquet. They were stunned to see Lin Yongjian and his son, who were wearing the palace eunuch's clothes, come up with a plate. It turned out that after Lin Yongjian and his son were rejected as beggars, they pitifully walked on the street. Under the arrangement of the program, they had an unforgettable and sad journey of begging. In the end, fortunately, the palace posted a notice saying that they were recruiting people, so they changed out of their beggar clothes. But being a servant in the palace was not a happy thing. They were also subject to the unspoken rules of the palace. As soon as they came up, they were put in their place. They had to use the ancient method of washing clothes with a hammer to wash a large basin of clothes clean. After tormenting themselves for the whole morning, they finally returned to their friends. Of course, they were still playing the role of servants. No matter what, after all the hardships in the morning, everyone could finally sit down to eat and chat together. In fact, from another point of view, among the 5 pairs of father and son, there were some who were in dire straits, and some who enjoyed great wealth and splendor. It was hard to say who was luckier in choosing the role, but one thing was for sure. Whether they were poor or even in prison, or became a high-ranking official, general, or emperor, this morning was a precious memory for them. But the test for the children was not over yet. At noon, the emperor was resting in the palace. Kiki and Xian were playing at the door. However, a very naturally dressed man with a very strange expression wanted to sneak in. Kiki and Xian were still very confused, but the audience exclaimed, "Fan Xiaohuang. I'm looking for a jade seal. Do you know about the jade seal? It's a good thing to make ice cream." Fan Xiaohuang lied to the children. "I know about the jade seal. The jade seal is a very, very big seal. I've seen it on TV before." But Fan Xiaohuang could not deceive the knowledgeable Chi-Chi. The little girl pouted and frowned as she looked at the other party. She became very alert. "The imperial jade seal is not used to make ice cream. My papa made ice cream before." Fan Xiaohuang, who was defeated, quickly stopped the little girl from explaining the process of making ice cream. He waved his hand and said, "Well, I'm actually looking for ice cream, not a jade seal. Do you want to eat ice cream? It's very comfortable to eat ice cream in such hot weather." The little foodie Xian's saliva was about to drown the palace. Chi-Chi's eyes also lit up as she nodded her head. Whatever alertness she had was immediately thrown to the back of her mind. "Then let me in. When I find the ice cream, we'll eat it together, okay?" Fan Xiaohuang said with a sly smile. But I don't think you're a good person." Chi-Chi still had a little bit of reason left in her. She played with her pigtail and pouted her little mouth as she said unhappily. Kiki was the first to speak, which made Xian, who was eager to try, pause. "But don't you want to eat ice cream?" Fan Xiaohuang felt that he, a 40-year-old man, was going to be stumped by a 4-year-old my daughter. "I want to eat ice cream." Kiki nodded, but then she shook her head and said, "But there's no ice cream in it." He did not know if the little girl had learned her lesson in the second trip in the earthen building. This time, she did not dare to easily abandon her principles for ice cream. "Yes, there's no ice cream in it." Xian finally mustered up the courage and said behind Kiki, "Aya, how come the plan I thought of was useless against these 2 children? Also Xian, aren't you a foodie? What happened to your disregard for your own safety?" Chapter 1429. Hey, it's okay. I'll just go in for a while, just for a while. I'll come out right away. Fan Xiaohuang coaxed the two children. He was mentally and physically exhausted. He felt like he could not exert his strength and wanted to force his way through. No, no. Kiki bravely opened her arms and said seriously, Xianxian's daddy is sleeping, you can't go in. Yes, you can't go in. Xianxian followed suit and opened his arms. How about this? How about you let me go in for a while, and then I'll come out to buy you ice cream? Fan Xiaohuang laughed. He almost couldn't hold on anymore. Why were the two children so stubborn? Xianxian was obviously moved. He licked his lips and his eyes lit up like a small light bulb. This was not a big deal. A small concession in exchange for a super delicious ice cream. This was a profitable business. He wanted to agree, but he still hesitated and looked at Kiki's sister. With sister here, he felt that sister should be the one to make the decision. Kiki was also obviously moved, but soon Kiki righteously refused. No, Xianxian, go and call your daddy, say that a bad guy is coming in. Fan Xiaohuang's panic and the audience's laughter erupted like a volcano at this moment. Oh, this child is too funny. Who knows how many people laughed until their stomach cramped. Fan Xiaohuang's sullen expression became the best background. The director had no choice but to stretch out two fingers. The spy inside, the eunuch who served the emperor, understood that it was time to carry out Plan B. He ran in and woke up Zhou Shimin, who was pretending to be asleep. There was no other way. If he didn't use the backup script, the show couldn't go on. Who are you? How did you get in? Zhou Shimin came out and asked in a very imposing manner. Unfortunately, Zhou Shimin's acting was still not good enough. If he asked, who are you? It would definitely be more interesting. Of course, Zhou Shimin was just a star in the sports industry. His performance was already good. Forget the lines, he could be a little more forgiving. After Zhou Shimin and Fan Xiaohuang talked for a long time, they finally broke down and started fighting. Fan Xiaohuang's acting skills were obviously better. Before the fight started, he still had a cynical and shifty look. There was no trace of the kind-looking and innocent little monk from back then. On the other hand, Zhou Shimin knew that his acting skills were not up to par, so he simply brought out the boxing moves he was most familiar with. With his flashy boxing moves and blurred footwork, he was like a boxing champion wearing the clothes of an emperor. Xiao, show me your legs. After Zhou Shimin finished showing off his legs, he pointed at Fan Xiaohuang as if they were having a street dance competition. Indeed, there was something fishy going on between the two of them. Fan Xiaohuang put away his acting skills and began to show off his punches and kicks. Needless to say, Fan Xiaohuang, who was a martial arts actor, had a solid foundation in kung fu. Finally, the duel began. Zhou Shimin and Fan Xiaohuang had a good time fighting. The boxing champion's fists came and went without a trace, hitting Fan Xiaohuang's arm with a bang. It felt like his fists were sinking into flesh. Xianxian and Kiki, who were watching from behind, were so excited that they screamed and jumped up and down, shouting for Xuanxuan's papa to do it. Fan Xiaohuang seemed to only have the strength to parry, but after a while, Zhou Shimin's moves slowed down. Fan Xiaohuang took the opportunity to grab Zhou Shimin's arm and pushed him back. This time, Fan Xiaohuang's arm was like a spring, but anyone could see that Zhou Shimin was acting. Zhou Shimin also used his own strength. Otherwise, how could he fly so high? I can't do it anymore. You guys go. Zhou Shimin waved his hand. He did not look like he could not do it at all. Instead, his wave made people feel like he was closing the door and letting Xianxian and Kiki go. It was true that newborn calves weren't afraid of tigers. Xianxian and Qiqi rushed out while shouting loudly. Looking at Xuanxuan's tense little face and Qiqi's giggling face, they were really too cute. The two 3- or 4-year-old children clenched their little fists and punched the big bad Fan Xiaohuang. Fan Xiaohuang hurriedly parried, and did not dare to fight back. At first, he was still smiling and squatting down to play with the two children, but gradually he could only use his hands to block. Later, he could only dodge. Xianxian had the posture of a little boxing champion. His two little fists were clenched, and his left and right uppercuts were very stylish. His punches were fast and accurate, like a storm of pear blossoms hitting Fan Xiaohuang's face. He almost KO'd Fan Xiaohuang, who was in his 40s. Hey, don't hit the face. Didn't I tell you? Don't hit the face. Zhou Shimin hurriedly shouted. At this time, Fan Xiaohuang did not dare to be careless. He quickly stood up. Needless to say, the little guy was not like an adult when fighting. He did not hold back his strength, and it was very painful when he fought. Moreover, Fan Xiaohuang still had to act. He. Kiki was a step slower, but the little girl also put up a posture to attack. Xian did not have time to learn from Poplar Fruit, but Kiki had inherited from Poplar Fruit. Her Benben boxing was a mixture of the essence of a lot of kung fu. Although it was not as powerful, the moves were first class. One moment, it was Taiji Fist, the next moment, it was Xingyi Fist, and then it was Ba Guozhang's Swimming Dragon. Coupled with the little girl's clear voice, the little guy's figure was like a butterfly jumping around, and it was so handsome that the audience did not want to. Wow, you are so good. Fan Xiaohuang laughed as he dodged. It was not just good looking. Chi was the same as Xian. She didn't know how to control her strength, and she couldn't control her strength. Even with her strength that was different from a mortal's, Fan Xiaohuang still cried out in pain when her punches and kicks landed on his body. 60% of them were real pain. Okay. Zhou Shimin saw his son and Kiki fiercely hammering Fan Xiaohuang's butt. He quickly stopped them. If Fan Xiaohuang continued to fight, he was worried that the guests he invited would not be able to withstand the beating. Zhou Shimin said a few words of education, and then praised Kiki and Xuan's outstanding performance in protecting the emperor. He said, "That's how it should be. You must stick to your principles and not be deceived by the small favors of bad people. Okay, eunuch, take them to buy ice cream." Zhou Shimin smiled and shook his head as he watched the eunuch conspicuously leave with the cheering Kiki and Xian. After all, they were still children. Your son's little fists really have inherited your teachings. Fan Xiaohuang waited until they left and the camera was removed before he smiled and said to Zhou Shimin, "Did you see Kiki's punches and kicks just now?" Zhou Shimin did not continue the topic. "Yes, I saw it. She really has practiced it. Her posture is very good. I don't know how her father taught her. Such a young girl has practiced so well. It's hard to say about fighting, but if she acted in a movie, she could have debuted as a martial arts child star." Fan Xiaohuang was not stingy with his praise. "That's because Poplar Fruit has real martial arts. I am not his opponent." Zhou Shimin said this with a proud expression. But he promised to take Xian as his disciple. Haha, my son is still the lucky one. Even his friend, Fan Xiaohuang, couldn't stand the smug look on his face. Chapter 1430. In the afternoon, everyone who had been separated for a long time finally gathered together again. Along with them were the guests invited by their fathers. With their introductions, some of the audience members who were unable to recognize all of them finally managed to recall these guests from the depths of their memories. Poplar Fruit invited Yuan. He became famous from Never Would I Have Expected, and then acted in many popular period dramas. In recent years he had become widely known. Of course, Poplar Fruit wanted to cooperate with Yuan's publicity, and simply introduced the movie that Yuan had just finished filming. Previously, the audience members who were still brooding over Yuan catching Poplar Fruit and causing Kiki to cry were relieved. They saw another side of Yuan. He treated Kiki like his own daughter. He was gentle and intimate. Lu Yi invited little Zhang Wei. There was no need to introduce him. He was the lead singer of The Flowers. After he went solo, he became really popular on Mango TV's 100 Changes show. Then last year, he even went on the stage of the Spring Festival Gala and sang a divine song, Double Shuang Air. Concubine Ning Jin, whose acting skills were off the charts, was invited by Lin Yongjian as a good friend. Both of them were veteran actors, so there was no need to introduce them. Everyone knew each other. Finally, Zhou Shimin invited Fan Xiaohuang. Coincidentally, Fan Xiaohuang had a classic character before. That was Shuzhu from Demigods and Semi-Devils. However, that was in the 1997 version. And in another version, Hu Jun's character, Xiaofeng, was also loved by the entire nation. Therefore, the two of them were considered to have some fate. Wait, it seems like there's one person missing? It turned out that the guest invited by Hu Jun did not arrive in time, and would only appear tomorrow. However, in the upcoming parent-child sports day, there would be guests participating. Without the help of a guest, Hu Jun could only find a helper from a large group of extras. The first competition was for the guest. They had to sit cross-legged on the soft cushion and use their hands to drag themselves forward bit by bit until they reached the distant finish line. Concubine Ning put on a woman's coquettish and unreasonable skill, coquettishly making everyone allow her to start from the center position. This group of guests, including Che and Yuan, did not tiptoe around. From the beginning, they were shouting and yelling, showing that they were going all out. However, Poplar Fruit, who was watching from the sidelines, knew that the outcome would not be surprising. After all, Che and Yuan, who had real kung fu, would never be left behind by others. Even for Fan Xiaohuang, he had only scratched the surface and had not gone deep into the essence of kung fu. Therefore, following the village chief's whistle, Che and Yuan used his powerful waist and abdomen to pull the cushion forward like a spring. If he had to come up with a metaphor to describe it, then Che and Yuan was like a fat rabbit. Although it was a little clumsy, it was still a nimble rabbit. Behind him was another fat rabbit, Fan Xiaohuang. He gritted his teeth and chased after him with all his might. If Che and Yuan was first, then he was not. In front of them, there was still Ning Jin, who was relying on the starting line in the middle, and still had the advantage. However, this advantage could not be maintained for long. Soon, the slow Ning Jin was overtaken by Che and Yuan and Fan Xiaohuang. She was so anxious that she screamed, but there was no other way. After all, Ning Jin was also old. Ning Jin, little Zhang Wei, and the walk-on at the back gradually formed the final group of laggards. If the two in front were fat rabbits, then the three of them were like silly fat pigs. Not to mention running, it was difficult for them to even move slowly. On the side, the fathers and children's groups who were watching were already in a mess. All kinds of screams were incessant, trying their best to cheer for the guests. Living up to everyone's expectations, Che and Yuan maintained his lead, and was the first to jump over the finish line. Behind him, Fan Xiaohuang, who was panting, slowly hit the finish line. Che and Yuan jumped out from the cushion and opened his arms with a victorious smile. "Uncle Che, you're too awesome." Kiki was so excited that she screamed. She spread her long legs and jumped into Che and Yuan's arms. Che and Yuan also excitedly lifted the little girl's arm high up in the air, as if Chi-Chi was his trophy. Behind them, Concubine Ning, who was about to reach the finish line, was shaking her heavy hair ornaments and panting tiredly. However, it seemed that little Zhang Wei would eventually catch up. Fortunately, little Zhang Wei was very gentlemanly and courteous. So Ning Jin escaped the embarrassment of being last in the starting line. Of course, the village chief could not help but run out, laughing and ridiculing, causing Concubine Ning to roll her eyes. Immediately, the next exercise began. This time, it was finally the father's turn. However, it was no longer moving the cushions, but rolling around in the quilt. Before this, the village chief asked about Poplar Fruit with concern. After all, this guy was seriously injured. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit had already recovered. In the previous trip, he could not do any strenuous exercise, but this time he could go all out. With the help of Che and Yuan and Kiki, Poplar Fruit was wrapped in a red quilt and tied up. In front of the camera, Poplar Fruit even imitated the squirming of a worm, making Kiki and the audience laugh. "Ready? Let's start," the village head ordered, and all the fathers began to roll. As soon as it started, the 5 fathers went all out. Everyone gathered their strength and swung their bodies. Very quickly, like Lu Yi, he turned into a wooden stake with its branches cut off. He placed it on the ground and began to roll over to the other side. In the beginning, Poplar Fruit's advantage was not obvious because he did not use his hands or feet, so his speed could not be reflected. In fact, Lu Yi was even slightly faster than Poplar Fruit by a body's length. But very quickly, Poplar Fruit's outstanding physique came into play. While Lu Yi, Hu Jun and the rest were spinning around in circles, feeling dizzy and disoriented, and needed to catch their breath, Yang Guo was still able to continue spinning towards the finish line in a spurt of energy. "Still need to go over." Poplar Fruit stopped dizzily but heard Che and Yuan's call. He could only use his strength to roll over the finish line's small slope and obtain first place. Needless to say about the gaming black hole Lin Yongjian, Zhou Shimin, who had a good physique, made a big mistake. He kept spinning in the wrong direction. With great difficulty, Zhou Shimin could only catch up to Lu Yi and obtain third place. Cheonjuan hugged Kiki and cheered as he rushed towards Poplar Fruit. The two of them were full of love, making the fujoshis in front of the TV excited. "Daddy, I want to play too." Chi-Chi excitedly pulled her father's hand and jumped up and down as she looked at Lin Yongjian, who was still rolling on the ground. "Want to play? Don't worry, it's your turn now." Chapter 1431. For the last match, the atmosphere was unprecedentedly tense. Because this time, it was the last chance for the lagging Lin Yongjian and his son to fight for hope. One had to know that at the beginning, the village chief had announced the essence of the sports meets prize, identity swapping. There were 4 rounds of competition, and each round would be based on the first to 5th place. The first place would get 5 points and so on. The one with the highest total points would get to choose the identity of their favorite character first. This was also why Poplar Fruit and the rest, who usually did not pay much attention to winning, would give their all in the competition. Before this, Kiki's team had already gotten the full 10 points, while Xianxian's team had also gotten a decent 7 points. Then Kongkong and Nuai were tied with 5 points. The last place was the pitiful Dejun, who had only gotten 3 points after 2 rounds. And among these 3 points, 1 point was given to him by little Zhang Wei, who had gotten Ning Jin to give it up. Hence, for this round of competition, everyone was holding back their energy, especially Dejun. In order to escape the fate of being a beggar, he had to work hard to get a better score. If he could not get a good result, even if he got 5 points in the last round, he would not be able to catch up with the other kids. In comparison, Kiki's side was much more relaxed. Poplar Fruit wrapped his daughter in a blanket and watched her giggle. Poplar Fruit half-squatted, his posture perfect. With one hand holding the rope, he lifted Kiki up like a dumbbell. The feeling of being wrapped up in a blanket and riding the clouds was too good. Kiki was not afraid of falling. She could not stop giggling. If not for the competition, Kiki would have wanted her father to continue playing. With the village chief's command, the competition began. As soon as they came up, the children spun around as if their lives depended on it. Of course, it didn't take long for them to stop one after another as if their car had run out of gas. The spinning made their heads dizzy, and even Chi-Chi was no exception. "Come on Kiki, come on." Poplar Fruit and Cheonjuan were a little carried away as they rushed over to cheer Kiki on. At this time, Kiki was lying on her back. Her whole body was wrapped in the quilt, and only her small head was exposed. Her hair was spread out, and she was as cute as can be. Kiki set off once again, but on the other side, someone was lost. Xianxian was even better than his father. As he flipped, he turned to the side. Zhou Shimin couldn't stand it anymore. She didn't care about her principle of not helping her son. She ran up to him and turned him over. In the end, there was no suspense. Kiki took first place. Of course, the price she paid was also very high. When the little girl sat up from the ground with great effort, her hair was disheveled, and her face was covered in sweat. She looked funny and pitiful at the same time. The second place was Kongkong. The older brother was indeed more determined than the younger brothers. Third place was Dejun. Although this was not ideal, it was indeed their team's best result. Fourth place was Nuai. The naive and sweet boy was spinning so fast that he almost crawled out of his blanket. The last place was, without any suspense, little fatty Xian. Although he persevered until the end, he was so tired that he wanted to curl up in his blanket and sleep. There was a change in the rankings. The first place was Kiki, with a total of 15 points. The second place was Kongkong, with a good result of 9 points. The third place was Xianxian, with 8 points. The fourth place was Nuai with 7 points. The fifth place was still behind Dejun. However, Dejun saw hope. They had obtained 6 points, and were only 3 points away from the second place. The last round of the competition was to eat the flatbread. There was a legendary story behind this flatbread. Poplar Fruit had heard of it when he was young. There was a lazy man whose wife was worried that he would starve to death. Hence, she made a huge flatbread for him and put it around his neck. This way, if he was hungry, he could eat it. When Poplar Fruit was telling this story, everyone could not help but look at Xian, who had just put the flatbread around his neck. Little fatty Xian licked his lips and looked as though he could not resist eating it. The story continued. Unexpectedly, when the sluggard's wife returned home, the sluggard had already starved to death. He had only finished the biscuit in front of him, but he had starved to death. He didn't even bother to use his hands to move the biscuit that he couldn't reach with his mouth. However, in this round of the competition, everyone was not allowed to move the flatbread with their hands. They had to eat it with their mouths. The children ate the innermost circle, while the guests and their fathers ate the outer 2 circles. Whoever had the least amount of flatbread left in the allotted time would get first place. The gluttonous eating began. Kiki and Xianxian's teams were still more well-behaved. Both teams ate diligently, especially Xianxian, who ate with great vigor. As for the other teams, they ate until the flatbread crumbs flew everywhere. Gradually, they seemed to have discovered a loophole in the game. They began to intentionally or unintentionally drop some flatbread pieces on the ground and use their cushions to cover them. Of course, the program team would not let them get away with it. They chose Kong Kong, the little guy who had been playing the role of Bao Qingtian, and let him be the final judge. Kong Kong was a good judge who could see through everything. He quickly uncovered the trick under the cushions and gave a very fair ranking. For the first time, Poplar Fruit's team did not get first place. The first place went to Xianxian's team, which had 2 men and a glutton. Xianxian had made a fool of himself just now. The competition had already ended. Yet he still wanted to eat the flatbread that his father had taken off his neck. Moreover, his desire to eat another bite was extremely strong. Zhou Shimin could not handle him at all. In the end, the cloak wrapped around Xianxian's body to prevent the flatbread's grease from touching his clothes was torn apart by Zhou Shimin. Xianxian was still desperately trying to crawl toward the meat bone, like a puppy. Poplar Fruit did not get first place, but they still managed to get second place. Kiki did not eat much. She was smiling the whole time, but Poplar Fruit and Cheonjuan still gave it their all. Third place was Nu Yi, and fifth place was Da Jun. These 2 teams were too cunning. They hid a lot of flatbread under the cushions. And fourth place was Kong Kong. There was no other way. Kong Kong was the judge. The upright little boy would not give himself a very high ranking. The final score was out. Kiki's 19 points were far in the lead. This lead could not be reversed long ago. Second place was Xianxian with 12 points. Third place was Kong Kong with 11 points. Fourth place was Nu Yi with 10 points. Last place was very sad. It was still Da Jun. No matter how many points he had, he did not want to reopen this scar. It was time to choose. Poplar Fruit was happy to find that he did not have to go back to prison. But what role should he change to? Poplar Fruit thought for a long time. In his mind, before the trip started, the conversation between himself and Kiki at home appeared. He smiled and waved his hand, saying, "My daughter really wants to be a princess. Then let's choose the emperor this time." It was as if it had been predestined. Before Poplar Fruit came, he had told his daughter that he would be the emperor, and Kiki would be the princess. Although he had experienced the pain of being in prison, it seemed that the joke from before had come true. Chapter 1432. Poplar Fruit chose emperor. At this moment, Kiki still did not understand the meaning of this. She was just smiling happily because her father said that she was going to be a princess. As for Lin Yongjian and Da Jun, they looked gloomy. They had already been beggars for the entire morning. Were they going to continue suffering in the afternoon? At this moment, the second place Xianxian stood up. Zhou Shimin said righteously, "This morning, we became emperors and enjoyed the prosperity and wealth. Then let us be beggars in the afternoon." Through the afternoon exchange, Zhou Shimin suddenly realized that his role was purely about enjoyment. It was not as subversive as Lin Yongjian and Da Jun. He wanted to let himself and Xianxian experience such a complicated experience. Zhou Shimin's unexpected actions gave Lin Yongjian a glimmer of hope. However, Hu Jun and Lu Yi had disappointed them. The two of them did not want to change into Poplar Fruit's previous role and continue staying in prison. Hence, the third and fourth place decided to switch roles. Then, Lin Yongjian was only left with the identity of a prisoner. The production team did not torture Lin Yongjian. At this moment, the village chief jumped out and said with a smile, "As for Dejun, because the prisoner role has no other plot, we have decided to arrange another role for you." What was this role? Empress. In other words, Lin Yongjian was going to play the role of Emperor Poplar Fruit's wife and play the role of Empress. Then, Dejun would naturally become the Emperor's child and inherit the role of Crown Prince left behind by Xian Xian. This was going to be fun. Concubine Ning had welcomed her greatest enemy. She was going to play out a top-level unscripted palace fight scene with the cross-dressing Lin Yongjian. The camera panned around the corner of the garden. A group of servants and palace maids were surrounding a tall figure as they walked over. When the audience focused their eyes, they were all shocked. Damn, which corner of the world did this evil spirit pop out from? At this time, Lin Yongjian was wearing a gorgeous dress and an exquisite neon crown on his head. His face was smeared with a thick layer of powder, bright lipstick, eyeshadow, eyelashes, and his hair was combed until it was shiny. This appearance was enough to scare a child to tears. If he had to find an appropriate analogy, then he was like the snake spirit in the Calabash Brothers. He was simply a lunatic. What the audience didn't know was that when Lin Yongjian appeared on the stage after putting on makeup, all the staff in the audience burst out laughing. He made one NG. When Ning Jin appeared on the stage, Ning Jin burst out laughing again. He made a second NG. After messing around a few times, everyone finally started to seriously record the show. Lin Yongjian was indeed a veteran actor. He had once played the role of the traitor to perfection. Now that he was playing the role of the Empress for the first time, he could actually play it very vividly. Her every movement and the look in her eyes made people's hearts beat wildly. It wasn't that he liked her, but that her inchi was truly oppressive, making one's hair stand on end. Sure enough, he and Ning Jin were good friends. The two of them vividly acted out the catfight in the palace, and all kinds of lines that were out of the script jumped out crazily like a ping-pong ball. The audience was just disgusted by Lin Yongjian. But now they were watching with relish and laughing from time to time. Of course, they wouldn't let go of Poplar Fruit. Not long after, Poplar Fruit, who had just put on the Emperor's clothes and went out, was surrounded by two women, who were about to fight. Lin Yongjian and Ning Jin insisted on Poplar Fruit judging who was better. Him or her, that was the question. Poplar Fruit rarely liked acting. He took advantage of the Emperor's majesty and made his Empress, and beloved concubine, tremble and stand on the side. Is it that you can't be friends anymore? Poplar Fruit's voice became very deep. At first glance, it was obvious that he learned from Huang Ama in Huanzhou. Yes, today, either she dies or I live. Lin Yongjian gnashed his teeth and said. That orchid gesture made Poplar Fruit have goosebumps. You die, I live. Of course, Imperial concubine Ning found the hidden meaning in the other's words and disdainfully said. Saying this, the two of them looked at each other, then snorted and turned their heads to look to the side. This acting, there was really nothing to say. Cough cough, since you two are like fire and water, then I will make a choice. It's time to make a choice. Yanghua said in an exaggerated tone. Emperor, choose me, choose me. Lin Yongjian and Ning Jin both pretended to be charming or pitiful and shouted. Shut up. Poplar Fruit waved his hand majestically, immediately frightening the two of them into silence. Poplar Fruit nodded with satisfaction. He continued to act and said, today we have reached this point. Then I will decide. Seeing the two of them nervous, Poplar Fruit smiled and said, If I choose Imperial concubine Ning. He deliberately paused, making Ning Jin's eyes shine with excitement. But Poplar Fruit quickly poured a basin of cold water on them. You are so beautiful. When I go home, it will be very, very troublesome. So I still choose to let my Empress stay. Poplar Fruit waved his sleeves, not giving Ning Jin time to cry. Come, take Imperial concubine Ning to prison and choose a day to behead her. This was simply heaven and earth-turning treatment. The audience held back their laughter and saw Ning Jin being taken away by Cheonjuan and then locked in prison. But this was probably the most ridiculous reason in history for abandoning someone, and also the most speechless and helpless reason for failure in the history of palace intrigue. The program team did let Poplar Fruit give up Ningjin and choose Lin Yongjian. This was the outline of the script, and the specific details were up to Poplar Fruit and the others. As a result, Poplar Fruit actually came up with such a reason. The audience couldn't laugh anymore. Thinking that you are beautiful, it will be difficult to explain when you go home, so you choose him and not you. How can Imperial concubine Ning defend herself? She wanted to work hard. Imperial concubine Ning's defeat also means the Empress's victory, but Lin Yongjian's small eyes narrowed with a smile. Why does it feel like a villain counterattacking? Well, the farce is over, and Lin Yongjian's snake-like face can finally disappear from everyone's sight for a while. Poplar Fruit, wearing a yellow robe, came to his palace. He was going to find his 2 children. In the magnificent palace, Kiki and Xian have also changed into exquisite clothes. The little girl was generous, and she smiled sweetly in front of her father, as if a real princess had returned. Yanggua gave her daughter a thumbs up and said with a smile, "That's what a princess of China should be like." In the past, when she wore a princess dress, she was more beautiful, but relatively speaking, that one was more modern, like a commoner princess. How could she have the feeling of a real royal daughter now? Chapter 1433. It was rare for Dejun to become the crown prince, but he did not show the look of a crown prince. Xian, on the other hand, was unrestrained due to his confusion. He felt that everything was restricted, especially when he saw the majestic Poplar Fruit Empress Ama. Luckily, Poplar Fruit and Kiki's complicated conversation about "his father is my wife" dispelled Dejun's nervousness. He felt that Uncle Poplar Fruit had only changed into a dragon robe. In fact, it was still the same Uncle Poplar Fruit that he was familiar with. It was still the original recipe, and it was still the familiar smell. According to the script, the 2 children were to go to the Imperial College to study Chinese studies. However, as Poplar Fruit had nothing to do and liked to teach others, he excitedly applied for him to be the children's teacher. However, the teaching this time did not cause a stir. This was because Poplar Fruit did not touch on any profound content. He was just teaching the children to read the 3-character classic, "Man at birth is good by nature." This was indeed a bit of a waste of talent, but Poplar Fruit still enjoyed it. The Chinese department's Ph.D. recited these ancient books that were full of wisdom. The ups and downs were very clear. It was as pleasant to listen to as a song. Just like that, the afternoon passed by peacefully. When it was dinner time, Poplar Fruit issued a general amnesty. The pitiful concubine Ning could finally be released from prison. As for the other fathers and sons who had experienced solving cases and leading the army, as well as begging, they all returned to the palace. It was rare for the program team to show mercy. The father and the children finally did not have to suffer any torment. They could comfortably enjoy the palace banquet provided by the program team. Needless to say, the meal was very sumptuous. It was as if the sumptuous fake Manchu Han imperial feast in the afternoon had become real. At night, after sending off the guests, the father and the children's role play had not ended. General Hu brought Kong Kong to the general's mansion. Lu Yi and Nui stayed in the Yaman's backyard. Zhou Shimin and Xian also stayed in their exclusive beggar's house. Of course, the beggar's house only looked a little shabby. The actual effect of staying in it was not bad. It was not worse than an express hotel. Of course, the most comfortable ones were Poplar Fruit and Lin Yongjian's families. Lin Yongjian removed his makeup and moved into the comfortable side palace with Dejun. Teacher Lin was still nagging at Dejun about the principles of life. There will always be ups and downs in life. You see, we were wandering the streets in the morning, and now we can live in such a luxurious palace, right? When you were dressed like that in the morning and were surrounded by people, did you feel uncomfortable? I don't think, Daddy. Lin Yongjian's preaching was quite annoying. In the previous few episodes, Dejun had repeatedly shown resistance, but he had not learned his lesson. But today, Dejun didn't show any annoyance. He just used a sentence to shut his father's mouth. "I think I'm very happy to be with my father." Lin Yongjian looked at his son with gratification, and didn't want to say anything more. He was quite happy now, wasn't he? The camera panned to an even more luxurious palace, where the emperor lived. This episode of Where Are We Going, Daddy? Really put in a lot of effort. Although it was a replica of a palace, there were probably not many people in China who could live in it and lie on a large bed made of yellow satin. Poplar Fruit and Kiki seemed to have become the biggest winners. Poplar Fruit sat by the bed, beaming as he watched his daughter's performance in front of him. In order to save her father in the morning, Kiki had learned a lot of palace etiquette from Ning Jin. Those things were useless, but after her father asked, the little girl excitedly performed for him. Poplar Fruit's smile wasn't a smile of appreciation like the audience's, but a smile of happiness that was difficult to describe with words. He wasn't watching Kiki's cute and elegant etiquette performance, but Kiki's efforts to save her father after she was imprisoned. To be able to live in a palace, Kiki was still very happy. After watching Frozen, the little girl had always hoped that she could be like the princess in the animated movie and have a super beautiful castle. Although the palace now had a cultural difference with the castle, in the little girl's eyes, it wasn't worse than the cold castle. Chi-Chi felt that she was even more like a princess now that she was living in this dazzling palace. However, when she was chattering with her father about her happy mood, the little girl's hair was loose. She didn't pay much attention to her image before sleeping. Except for her delicate and moist little face, Kiki didn't look like a little princess at all. Before we came, Daddy didn't lie to you, right? Poplar Fruit smiled as he lay on the bed, looking at his daughter who was sitting on the big bed and gesturing. He said, "You're like little Swallow. In the end, you can still become a real princess." The process was very important, but at this time, there was no need to have a summary meeting like Lin Yongjian. It was fine as long as she was happy. Hee, so I really became a princess? Kiki pinched her sleeves and asked with some embarrassment and anticipation. Of course. Tonight, you're a princess. Poplar Fruit laughed. However, the princesses of the Great Qing dynasty weren't called princesses, they were called Gij. I know. Little Swallow is called Huanju Gij. Ziwei is called Gij Mingju. Kiki said happily. Then what's your name? Poplar Fruit teased his daughter and asked. I'm called Kiki Gij. Before she finished speaking, the little girl who loved to laugh started giggling. It was as if every word she said to her father contained something that made her happy. Needless to say, laughter was contagious. Looking at the little girl's beautiful smile, the audience couldn't help but laugh. Poplar Fruit continued to tease his daughter. You're saying that your name is Kiki Gij 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 Gugu? He seriously changed the tone of Kiki's laughter just now, making it sound as if Kiki really made a slip of the tongue. No, there aren't that many spaces. Poplar Fruit's mischief wasn't the funniest part. Kiki's serious explanation to her father was the reason why the audience couldn't help but feel angry and amused at the same time. There are only 2 spaces. Innocent little princess, how could you be so easily fooled? And Poplar Fruit, you're too bad. Such a cute little girl. Yet you still have the heart to bully her. Oh, is it Kiki Gij? Poplar Fruit said. Yes, Kiki Gij, repeat after me. Kiki Gij. Kiki happily moved her little butt and excitedly became a language teacher. Like father, like daughter. Our Kiki Gij was also a person who liked to teach others. Kiki Gij Kiki Gij. Poplar Fruit smilingly repeated after his daughter's somewhat childish voice. Nowadays, many celebrities doted on Kiki in the name of love. There was a news article that said so. Sometimes, Poplar Fruit's love for Kiki had indeed reached the level of doting, just like now. However, had Poplar Fruit really always doted on Kiki? Of course not. If there was a chance for her to try and face setbacks and pain within an acceptable range, Poplar Fruit wouldn't hesitate at all. For example, tomorrow. Chapter 1434. For the whole day, you can't be with your father. The village chief's words broke the joyous atmosphere of the morning. Suddenly, all the children became nervous. No, I want to be with my daddy. Kiki was the same as the other children. Her first reaction was to turn around and hug her father tightly. Then she pouted her mouth. The village chief saw that the situation was not good and quickly explained. It's like this. Every child has to go with another father to complete your task today. Of course, after completing the task, you can still see your father. But if you can't complete it, then you can't change back. The village chief added a little tension to the children in the end. So you have to work hard to complete the task. Poplar Fruit patted his daughter's shoulder and smiled. After completing the task, won't you be able to see your father? Moreover, you're already so familiar with these fathers. What are you afraid of? That's right. They have been through so many journeys together. These fathers of her good friends are actually super good people. Kiki understood and immediately turned from gloomy to sunny. She jumped up and down as she waited for the village chief to announce her group. Dejun and Uncle Lu Yi. Lu Yi rubbed his hands together, but Dejun was a little gloomy. Xian Xian and Uncle Lin Yongjian. This combination was a little interesting. The muddle-headed little foodie met a serious father. Kiki. Before the village chief could say anything, Kiki secretly smiled and pointed at Hujun. This scene was pointed out by the village chief, causing everyone to laugh out loud. It seemed that the honest and steady Hujun was really liked by the children, especially the girls. Moreover, Hujun had a daughter who was already in her teens. He was very experienced in raising and taking care of his daughter. It was much better than raising a boy. Kong Kong was deeply resentful. However, the village chief did not do as she wished and announced. Kiki and Uncle Zhou Shimin are in a group. However, this was not bad. She was more familiar with Xian Xian's father, and Zhou Shimin had a good relationship with Poplar Fruit. When they were in Kaiyun, after the fireworks, the two families had a meal together. Kiki had even directed a short drama. Zhou Shimin, who had given birth to two boys, was actually looking forward to having a daughter, in fact. He usually took good care of Kiki, so when he heard that he was in the same group as Kiki, Zhou Shimin raised his arms and shouted. Under Lin Yongjian's envious gaze, Zhou Shimin smiled and lifted Kiki up high. This was probably what he wanted to do to his future daughter. Raise little fatty Xian? Little fatty Xian was too heavy. Moreover, this little foodie didn't feel any joy when lifting it up. Next up would be Nuai and Hujun. Kong Kong would be in the same group as Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit scratched his head at the thought of being with Kong Kong. If it were other children, it would be better. For example, Xian Xian and Nuai. Poplar Fruit felt that he could control it. Kong Kong was older and had her own thoughts. She was usually cold and aloof. Poplar Fruit didn't know if he could communicate well with Kong Kong. This was definitely not a small challenge. After receiving the mission card, Poplar Fruit looked at the mission card and patted Kong Kong's shoulder. Come Kong Kong, do you want to read it? Kong Kong was silent. It's really not easy to deal with. Poplar Fruit scratched his head. He was a little conflicted. He touched his chin and could only read it himself. Sing in a crowded place. Sing in a crowded place? Let Kong Kong? Why was Kong Kong cold and aloof? It was because he didn't fit in. Let a boy who didn't like to be in the limelight sing in a crowded place. He might even embarrass himself. Wouldn't that kill him? Not to mention Kong Kong. Even Poplar Fruit felt that it would be difficult for him to sing in a crowded place. The main thing was that he would be out of tune when he sang. What should he do? After separating from his daughter, Poplar Fruit brought Kong Kong along. However, at the yamen, Poplar Fruit was worried. He didn't expect Kong Kong to be very excited to follow him, but at least she shouldn't be as cold as she was now. He asked him what song to sing, but Kong Kong didn't say a word. After asking a few questions, he sighed and turned to walk to the side. Seeing how indifferent Director Kong was, Poplar Fruit scratched his head. Do you miss your father? Poplar Fruit thought of a possibility. As soon as he said that, Poplar Fruit saw that Kong Kong's eyes were starting to turn red. He guessed right. Kong Kong really did miss her father. In other words, she wanted to be with her father now, not with Poplar Fruit. Unlike Poplar Fruit and Kiki, Hujun and Kong Kong didn't spend much time together. It was a rare opportunity to travel with their father, but now it turned out to be with someone else's father. His father, on the other hand, looked very happy as he left with the other children. Poplar Fruit guessed that his daughter wouldn't be like Kong Kong, because Kiki knew that leaving her father's side was only temporary. Just like at the earthen building in Min Province, her father would still return to her side at night. Moreover, Kiki was usually with her father, so she wouldn't be as reluctant to leave as Kong Kong. After figuring out the origin of Kong Kong's emotions, Poplar Fruit sat next to Kong Kong for a while, but he didn't try to comfort Kong Kong. Kong Kong, who had her own thoughts, wouldn't be so easily comforted, unless she was as gentle and understanding as the assistant. Poplar Fruit didn't think he had that charm. The two of them didn't look at each other, and just sat there for a while. The staff members who were following them were a little anxious, thinking that the two of them had reached a dead end, and were about to come up with a plan. At that moment, Poplar Fruit patted Kong Kong's shoulder and stood up. He smiled and said, "Wait for me here." After that, Poplar Fruit walked out. At that moment, no matter how cold Director Kong was, he couldn't be cold anymore. He was very curious. He raised his head and didn't move, but his eyes followed. Poplar Fruit walked out and discussed something with a group of staff members. He even gestured with his hands, looking like he was about to make a big scene. The assistant director that Poplar Fruit was facing was a little troubled, but after pondering for a while he nodded. "What are you trying to do?" If there was a voiceover, it would definitely be able to explain Kong Kong's thoughts at that moment. Seeing that Poplar Fruit had returned, the young man curled his lips in disdain, but the expression in his eyes betrayed him. He actually wanted to know what Poplar Fruit had done just now. "Let's go? Since we can't finish the mission now, I'll take you to see something." Poplar Fruit smiled at Kong Kong and gestured for him to follow him. Kong Kong hesitated for a while, but still stood up and followed him with a blank expression. What was it to see? Chapter 1435. Poplar Fruit led Kong Kong to a mysterious house, and the show came to an end. The camera panned to Kiki, who was leaving with Xuan's father. They had received a mission card earlier, and the requirement was for Kiki to learn boxing from Zhou Shimin. She had to defeat Xianxian, who had been trained by Zhou Shimin since young. There was no doubt that Xuan's small fists were powerful. In the past few episodes, clips of Xianxian practicing boxing with his father were widely known. Although he was the youngest and the shortest, he was very skilled in boxing. Moreover, he had a tenacity that refused to admit defeat. It would not be easy for Kiki, who was a girl, to defeat Xianxian. "Uncle will teach you boxing later, okay?" Zhou Shimin walked on the road, both his hands clenched into fists. One of his hands was still holding the mission card in a fist position. He made a left and right hook pose, and his fists were strong and vigorous. "I know how to do it too. My daddy taught me the Benben fist." The little girl bent her legs and bent her waist, and made a tight martial arts posture. She was not well prepared, and it gave people a feeling of cuteness. Zhou Shimin looked at Kiki and liked it very much. He smiled and said, "There's a big difference between martial arts and boxing. Do you want to try boxing?" Okay. I like boxing too." Chi-Chi giggled. In truth, the little girl did not know much about the concept of boxing, but she still had an eager expression on her face. When they arrived at the boxing gym, Kiki looked around curiously, including the lonely boxing ring in the middle. It was the first time Kiki had seen such a place. Come up." Zhou Shimin climbed up first, lifted the rope of the fence, and reached out to pull the little girl up. "Is this for singing?" Kiki asked whimsically. "I've seen it on TV before." She was referring to the PK segment of China's Top Voice. However, she did not mention the name of the program. She reckoned that it would be edited out even if she did. "No, this is the boxing ring. We will train here today." Zhou Shimin explained some simple rules of the boxing ring to Kiki. "It's okay if you don't remember. I'll tell you when we meet later." Chi-Chi nodded her head in confusion. She had actually remembered everything, but she was very mechanical and did not understand it. Before boxing practice, Zhou Shimin took Kiki to do some warm-up exercises. Kiki's personality was really good. Firstly, she would not lose her temper casually. Secondly, she would not inexplicably fall into her own little emotions. Thirdly, she would find these exercises, which were not very attractive, troublesome. The little girl kept giggling, causing the already bright boxing gym to be filled with bright sunshine. Jumping and jumping, kicking and waving, it was as if a beautiful dandelion was fluttering in the wind. Zhou Shimin also had a good time teaching Kiki. It was impeccable, okay? The little girl had been working very hard to complete the warm-up exercises he taught. Not only was she very sensible, but her movements were also very close to the standard. After all, Chi-Chi was only 4 years old. The little girl was even more sensible than the 7-year-old Kong Kong. How surprising and likable was this performance? The smile on Zhou Shimin's face did not stop. The crow's feet at the corner of his eyes were about to bloom, but he did not have any scruples. When teaching Kiki boxing, Zhou Shimin had the illusion that he was teaching his own daughter. Suddenly, Zhou Shimin was intoxicated by the pride that arose spontaneously from the excellence of his own children. Why was the second child a son? It was not that he did not like his youngest son, Hao, but at this moment he suddenly felt that having a daughter was a very fortunate thing. When you punch here, don't stand still. Look at me, follow this leg and watch again. Zhou Shimin taught her step by step. Chi-Chi was a quick learner. She only needed Zhou Shimin to teach her a lot of simple actions once, and she would be able to do the more complicated ones after Zhou Shimin had demonstrated them twice. Very good. Very good. Zhou Shimin smiled from ear to ear. In fact, at this time, Zhou Shimin was not only smiling because he liked the little girl, but also because he loved her talent. Not to mention the various spiritual requirements behind boxing, such as perseverance, strength, aggressiveness, and so on. Just from the technical level, Kiki's talent was the best Zhou Shimin had ever seen. Xianxian had been boxing since she was a child. She had watched her father compete since she was a child, and she had already practiced with her father since she was a child. When she waved her fleshy little fists, even Fan Xiaohuang had to retreat. However, Kiki's learning effect in one morning had already reached 50 to 60% of Xianxian's. Putting aside his age, his learning speed was simply too astonishing. This was a relatively general learning step by step. In the future, with diligent training, Kiki could string these skills together and not be much worse than Xianxian. Zhou Shimin even felt that when he started boxing at the age of 16, he did not learn as fast as Kiki. If Kiki had a foundation in martial arts, then Zhou Shimin had it too. Before he started boxing, he also practiced martial arts for 2 years. Why wasn't he as good as Kiki? It could only be said that the talent of the poplar fruit that Kiki inherited was too dazzling. And there were many things that made people envious. For example, Kiki's height. She was only 4 years old, but she was almost the same height as the 7-year-old Kong Kong. Zhou Shimin could only look at her and sigh. He was only 1.62 meters tall. The genetic gap between him and the poplar fruit's 1.88 meters was too big. For example, Kiki's appearance was inherited from her mother's genes. Although she still had single eyelids and small eyes, her overall appearance was not too bad. But compared to Kiki, the difference in the genetic influence of the poplar fruit was obvious. Poplar fruit's appearance was undeniably handsome, and it was compatible with both Eastern and Western aesthetic standards. Kiki was the same. She was already mature at the age of 4. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that she was a beauty. Speaking of which, Kiki looked very similar to the fairy sister Lu Yifei when she was young. They were both lively and cute little beauties. Of course, there were still people who paid attention to Kiki's education on the internet. Poplar Fruit's family was born in a farmer's family. It was not considered a scholarly family, but Poplar Fruit's double doctorate, future university professor status, and Fong Beibei's master's degree meant that Kiki's environment was not inferior to that of a scholarly family. Everyone had seen Kiki's French before, but they were not surprised. Her father was a master of languages. How bad could the child be? Well, what was strange was that Zhou Shimin did not feel jealous or frustrated. Instead, he felt gratified and happy, just like when he taught Xianxian. Chapter 1436. The door was pushed open. It was actually a conference room in the film city. Soon, some staff members came in with laptops, cameras, and other equipment. Poplar Fruit wasn't going to explain anything, and Kong Kong wasn't very afraid in this unfamiliar environment. He first stood silently beside Poplar Fruit for a while, then couldn't hold back his curiosity and looked over. Seeing this, the corners of Yongguo's mouth curled up slightly. He gently patted Kong Kong's shoulder, and then put him on the ground. The two of them stood side by side like brothers. Do you know what they are doing? Poplar Fruit asked. Assembling the computer. Mr. Kong thought that he was experienced and knowledgeable, so how could he be stumped by such a small problem? However, because of this competitive attitude, he wasn't as cold as before, and Poplar Fruit naturally put his hand on his shoulder. And then, Poplar Fruit asked patiently. Mr. Kong finally shook his head. There was a song that said, "When the corners of your mouth are down, it's beautiful, just like the clear water under Anha Bridge." However, Mr. Kong wasn't Miss Dong. Although the corners of his mouth were naturally down, the distance was always subtly proportional to the downward curve. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Come on, I'll show you." After that, Poplar Fruit rolled up his sleeves, and his attitude was very serious, just like how he usually was in class. In the interlude interview, Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Actually, I know that Kong Kong is a little different from other children. He has his own thoughts and personality. This is a good thing, because such a child has a very strong sense of justice. But because of this personality, it's not easy for him to accept me as his temporary father. So I decided to find another way, instead of coaxing him like a child." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Treat him as an equal, and find something that resonates with him." Poplar Fruit walked to the front of the computer, fumbled around a little, and switched the projection mode. The small screen of the computer was projected on the screen in the conference room. Although it was not as clear, it was not in front of the computer, which made it easier for the cameraman to take pictures. Poplar Fruit skillfully typed a line of internet address in the address bar. Although this computer didn't have his own bookmark, Poplar Fruit had already memorized it by heart, so he didn't need to use a search engine. Poplar Fruit introduced it and said, "This is the website entrance of the online remote teaching platform that I created with many caring students from all over the country." Remote teaching was no longer Poplar Fruit's personal backyard. In fact, for the better development of the charity organization, Poplar Fruit had completely withdrawn from the management team. He only retained the title of honorary chairman under everyone's pleas. The remote teaching organization was managed democratically by representatives selected by various universities. Instead, it displayed even more outstanding results. First of all, the progress of the platform. In the past, the framework of this platform was set up by Fat Dragon's company, but it was not perfect enough, and there were many loopholes and inadequacies in the experience. Now, many experts were selected from many universities in the country to redo the framework, and professional design students helped to design the UI. All of this labor was free and voluntary. Poplar Fruit heard such a story at the time. It was a class of students at Shuemu University who pulled the teacher into it. They patted their chest and said, "We don't charge if we don't do well, and we don't charge if we do well. Let's just treat it as after-class practice." After many adjustments, the current remote teaching system was not worse than the software of large companies. They even developed a mobile app. It allowed some volunteers to mark children's homework and answer questions through mobile phones or tablets. Of course, in addition to the system upgrade, a more scientific and intelligent volunteer service mechanism was also developed by this group of lovely Chinese university students. Through the division of regional responsibility, they let different universities be more responsible for children in different poor areas. Through the mathematical modeling of the School of Mathematics, the division of labor and time arrangement of volunteers were more reasonable. This allowed volunteers to enter their free time into the system and get a detailed schedule for the next week. It would not squeeze the energy of the volunteers. Instead, through more scientific allocation, it allowed the entire large group of volunteers to operate efficiently. It reduced the effort of manpower, improved efficiency, and reasonably planned resources. Needless to say, this intelligent volunteer scheduling system had won a very dazzling award in the Communist Party Central Committee this year. Many volunteer teams from both domestic and foreign countries came to learn from their experience. In addition to the above two, there was also an inconspicuous improvement, which was the expansion of the Remote Teaching Charity Fund. In the past, the charity fund was supported by Poplar Fruit alone, but from this year onwards, there had been a change. The management team of the charity fund was originally promoted by Poplar Fruit, Wang Yuba and Lin Xingshan. But Wang Yuba decided to expand the team and fully fit in with the remote teaching management team. While retaining the marketization and standardization of the fund, it increased the foundation of the masses and a more comprehensive supervision mechanism. Needless to say, the charity donations received by the foundation were several times more than before. Although Poplar Fruit was still at the top with more than 300 million donations, this year, Poplar Fruit's donations no longer accounted for the majority. The resourceful university students pulled in a lot of donations from many well-known people in society. Not long ago, Wang Yuba ambitiously said to Poplar Fruit that at this rate of growth, by the middle of next year, they could consider upgrading the remote teaching equipment for the students in poor areas in the country. The equipment now was the standard 2 years ago, and it was much worse than the average computer. When Poplar Fruit explained the remote teaching to Kong Kong, he went a little too far. He almost talked about the history and development of remote teaching. Although Kong Kong was fascinated by it, the program crew cut straight to the point, leaving only the beginning and the end. After entering the remote teaching platform, Poplar Fruit took advantage of the break time of the children in Xiong village to take over the video control of a class. As a result, the moment the news came out, all the children in the school squeezed into this class. 3 years passed in a flash. Now among the children in Xiong village, many of the old faces had disappeared. Children like Xiong Xiaofeng and Xiong Anshuan had graduated from primary school and entered the county's junior high school to continue their studies. The little ones who were still naked in the beginning had now become senior students. What had changed was their appearance, and more importantly, their spirit and appearance. Looking at the crowd coming over one by one with hopeful smiles, Poplar Fruit felt as if a lifetime had passed. For Kong Kong, this was a huge shock. He had seen some photos on the website when Poplar Fruit was introducing it. There were old photos of Xiong village there. The difference was huge. Chapter 1437. The temporary camera was not very good, and the quality was terrible, but that did not hinder Poplar Fruit and Kong Kong from communicating with the group of children. It's Kong Kong, it's Kong Kong. In their spare time, some children would also borrow remote equipment to watch some TV programs to improve their understanding of the outside world. As the great benefactor of Xiong village, Poplar Fruit appeared on a TV program, and naturally, he was also sought after by the Miao people in Xiong village. Therefore, when Poplar Fruit moved the camera to Kong Kong, it was not strange that they recognized Kong Kong immediately. However, the enthusiasm of the children in Xiong village was a little unbearable for Kong Kong, who did not like to face noisy environments. It's okay, they're saying hello to you. Poplar Fruit laughed and pulled the nervous Kong Kong back. In fact, the children in Xiong village were not very different in age from Kong Kong, because they were all primary school students. Although Kong Kong was relatively younger, the children in the mountains could not compare to her experience. Moreover, because she had been eating and drinking well since she was young and had sufficient nutrition, she was even taller than the 5th grade children in the mountains. Therefore, it was not a problem to treat them as peers. At first, Kong Kong was a little reluctant to speak. This was caused by her nervousness in front of so many people. However, as the large group of curious children kept throwing out all kinds of questions, Kong Kong gradually changed from being tight-lipped to being a man of few words. In the end, she almost said everything she knew. Don't you have to go to class when you're filming the program? Do you guys usually play basketball? I heard that all the schools in Beijing have libraries, right? There were all kinds of questions, but they all reflected the children's desire for the outside world. Kong Kong interacted with them. At first, she still had a little pity in her heart, but gradually, Kong Kong found that she wanted to understand them very much. She wanted to know what kind of background these children grew up in, who were still grinning from ear to ear when they asked such childish questions about common sense. It was because of this curiosity that Kong Kong and the children in the mountains gradually transitioned from answering passively to answering questions. In between answering questions, Kong Kong would also ask some questions that she wanted to know. Is your hometown very far away? Your father and mother went out to work. Then do you miss them very much? Did you make your own tables? During the conversation, Kong Kong realized that the other party wasn't as ignorant as she thought. Yes, I did grow up in the city and have followed my father to many places, including overseas. In terms of experience, they couldn't compare with me. But in fact, over the years, through the remote teaching system and network channels, the children really did not lack understanding of the outside world. They just lacked the sense of reality of witnessing it with their own eyes. From time to time, some internet buzzwords would pop up from the conversations of the children living in the mountains. Combined with the image of the dark-skinned and old-fashioned mountain children, it made people feel that these two should not coexist in the same picture. Kong Kong was not the only one who saw the reality of poverty and the exuberant spirit. Even the entire country's audience could see the transformation of these children from the mountains. Education would not bring monetary aid to the mountainous areas, but education would bring hope to those in poverty. The time between classes was extended to half an hour, but in the end, Poplar Fruit still interrupted Kong Kong's conversation with her new friends and asked the children to go back to class. The children had to go to class, and Poplar Fruit and Kong Kong also had to continue recording the show. How was it? After chatting for so long, what are your thoughts now? Poplar Fruit turned off the video system, but did not close the computer. He smiled and asked Kong Kong. Kong Kong looked at Poplar Fruit, but pursed her lips and did not say anything. It was not that she was cold, but she did not know how to answer. After chatting for half an hour, she seemed to have a lot of emotions in her heart, but she did not know how to summarize them into a few sentences. Poplar Fruit's question was too difficult. Asking a first grader who had just started primary school was no less difficult than asking a first grader to write an 800-word essay. Do you feel that they are very pitiful? Poplar Fruit did not make things difficult for Kong Kong, and gave her a direction. A little. Kong Kong nodded and finally opened her mouth. But compared to 3 years ago? Poplar Fruit asked. Kong Kong looked at the old photos that reappeared on the computer. She rubbed her nose and said, "Better than before." After saying that, Kong Kong felt that it was not enough, so she added, "A lot better." Poplar Fruit looked at Kong Kong with admiration and said, "Then what do you think caused them to change so much in 3 years?" Kong Kong thought for a while and said uncertainly, "Is it because of you?" Until now, the conversation between Kong Kong and Poplar Fruit had finally become less awkward. It was as if they had returned to the time when Hu Jun was around. Their conversation was very casual and relaxed. "Haha, how could I do so much by myself?" Poplar Fruit laughed and said, "It's because of education, or should I say because of long-distance education. There are tens of thousands of college students in the country working together. Everyone contributed their own strength to bring education and hope to the children in the mountainous areas of our country." Kong Kong nodded, not fully understanding. Poplar Fruit did not explain too much to Kong Kong about the principles of long-distance education. Kong Kong definitely did not understand. Moreover, Poplar Fruit did not want to introduce long-distance education to Kong Kong. This was just a process and not their goal. They still had to record the program and complete the mission. Poplar Fruit laughed and said, "Then do you want to be part of the group that helps the children in the mountainous areas?" Kong Kong nodded seriously. He was a very, very kind boy, but he was very puzzled and asked, "How can I help?" He was not a university student, so he couldn't teach those older brothers and sisters. Poplar Fruit laughed and said, "We do charity and volunteer work. We have the money and the ability to contribute. You can't do anything right now because you're too young." Kong Kong nodded and looked at Poplar Fruit expectantly. "But we can donate money. Look at our charity fund. We have raised so much money to buy better teaching equipment for the children in the mountainous areas next year." Poplar Fruit laughed and said, "Are you willing to work with me today to earn some money and donate it to them?" Kong Kong continued to nod sincerely. "When I say work hard, I mean that we have to go to the streets and sing in front of real passers-by." Poplar Fruit said exaggeratedly, "When we go out, there will definitely be a lot of strangers surrounding us. There may be dozens of people, or even hundreds of people. Then, will you be afraid to sing in front of so many people?" Kong Kong's neck shrank. Obviously he was frightened by Poplar Fruit's description, but he quickly snorted, raised his neck and nostrils and said, "Who would be afraid?" Chapter 1438. Okay, let's do it like that. When the time comes, no one will feel embarrassed. How about it? Yanghua smiled and raised her right fist, holding it in the air. Kong Kong pursed her lips and punched Yanghua very seriously. She was a little unconvinced and stubborn as she said, "Don't you feel ashamed?" Later, when Poplar Fruit was interviewed, he was asked this question. His relationship with Kong Kong seemed to have gone beyond the category of father and son, and was more like a pair of brothers. Poplar Fruit smiled and spread his hands, saying, "I learned this from Brother Shimon. After interacting with Kong Kong for a day, I understood one thing. The feeling of interacting with a son and a daughter is indeed different." "You really learned a lot," Poplar Fruit concluded. In the meeting room, Poplar Fruit and Kong Kong discussed the song they were going to sing. The theme song, "Where Are We Going, Daddy?" was of course the first choice, but in order to raise more money, Poplar Fruit said to Kong Kong, "Today you have to make a breakthrough." During the intensive preparation period, Kiki and Zhou Shimon's boxing training was also gradually getting better. In order to raise the little girl's confidence, Zhou Shimon decided to be the human punching bag and let Kiki try out the results of her previous training. Of course, Chi-Chi had to wear boxing gloves. If she was barehanded, Chi-Chi's tiny fists that weren't considered fleshy would cause a lot of pain. The bones of her fists were there for all to see. In a boxing competition, one couldn't use their legs or palms. They could only use their fists. This was very different from more flexible martial arts. Kiki also took a long time to get used to not having to raise her legs or kick. Come. Hit me, hit me." Zhou Shimon dodged nimbly, and Kiki kept missing, making the little girl pout and laugh. Kiki had used too much force in her fist and couldn't pull it back in time. Zhou Shimon gently touched her face with his boxing glove. The little girl was not angry. She giggled and said, "You're too powerful. Even I can't hit you. Your punching speed can be even faster, just a bit faster, and you'll be able to hit me. Come on, let's try again." Zhou Shimon continued to squat and reached out to Kiki. "Ooh." The little girl was panting slightly and beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. However, her physical strength was actually very good, and she didn't complain about being tired even once. This time, Zhou Shimon went easy on her. The entire nation's audience saw that he was deliberately slow when he dodged. As a result, Kiki's punch landed on his left cheek. How could Kiki know when to stop? In order to listen to her temporary father's advice, the little girl used all her strength in this punch. Kiki's strength really shouldn't be underestimated. In any case, when the little girl was recording the show, she also carried a big basket of vegetables and walked as if she was flying. This punch directly made Zhou Shimon, who was squatting unsteadily and didn't wear any head protection, suffer a hidden loss. With a bang sound, Zhou Shimon was already KO'd on the stage with his forelimbs sprawled out on all fours. It was quite painful. Zhou Shimon was secretly surprised. The little girl's strength was comparable to that of a 7- or 8-year-old boy. Perhaps even Kong Kong wasn't as strong as her. However, this frightened the kind Kiki. She looked anxious, a little scared, and a little worried. She went over and asked softly, "Uncle Zhou, are you hurt?" "I'm fine. Uncle is fine." Zhou Shimon smiled and reached out his hand. Then Kiki sensibly hugged him with her two small arms and pulled him up from the ground. Kiki gently rubbed Zhou Shimon's cheek with her boxing glove and asked a little nervously, "Uncle Zhou, are you in pain?" "No, it's not very painful. You can just brag about it." Zhou Shimon changed his words on the spot. Chi-Chi believed his words and moved her little face closer to him. She gently blew a breath of celestial air on his cheek. It was sweet and fragrant, instantly making him feel 100 times more spirited. Any pain would be healed. "Kiki, you're amazing." Zhou Shimon gave a thumbs up and smiled at Kiki. "Did you know? You're queen." Kiki obviously understood the meaning of this word. She pursed her lips and smiled a little embarrassedly. Her shy smile was very cute. She asked, "Why queen?" "Queen means empress," Zhou Shimon explained superfluously. "Why empress?" Kiki hadn't had a million whys in a long time. But her excited look made the audience feel that if Zhou Shimin didn't give a reasonable explanation, he would be guilty of the most heinous crime. Fortunately, Zhou Shimin had already thought of an excuse. He said, "Because you're a princess off stage. When you're on stage, you're so amazing that you're the empress." Suddenly, the little girl with a longing expression became embarrassed. She really wanted to laugh happily, but the person in front of her was not her father. In front of Uncle Zhou Shimin, Chi-Chi was really embarrassed to laugh so happily in front of her father. The little girl pursed her lips and tried hard to suppress the surging emotions in her heart from Zhou Shimin's flattery. But the corners of her mouth were already curled up, and her beautiful smiling eyes were already unable to hide her joy. "Ayakiki, how can you be so cute?" The camera changed again, and after a few turns, it returned to Poplar Fruit. At this time, Poplar Fruit finally finished the final preparations. He pulled a suitcase-like portable speaker and went with Kong Kong to the crowded market outside the film studio. Because the film studio was a tourist attraction, besides a large number of extras who gathered there to follow the crew to film movies and TV series, there were also many tourists from all over the country who came to visit. So not long after they appeared in the market, Poplar Fruit and Kong Kong were surrounded by many real tourists. Fortunately, they were all well-mannered. Under the guidance of the staff, everyone gathered outside the circle and took photos and videos excitedly with their mobile phones. They didn't rush in and affect the recording of the show. Kong Kong was a little nervous with so many people looking at him. He pursed his lips when he was nervous, and the corners of his mouth turned down. He looked very serious. Nervous. Poplar Fruit patted Kong Kong's shoulder and asked with a smile. He was actually a little nervous. If it was a speech to the public, Poplar Fruit wouldn't be afraid. Poplar Fruit had seen bigger crowds than this. But this time he was going to sing. Of course, Poplar Fruit could still overcome it. At least, he couldn't show his fear in front of Kong Kong. Kong Kong was indeed nervous, but she didn't want to admit it to Poplar Fruit, so she just shook her head. Poplar Fruit didn't say much to her. He decided to set an example and liven up the atmosphere first. Poplar Fruit put up the small blackboard he brought, then took the microphone and said with a smile, brothers, sisters, today Kong Kong and I are borrowing this precious place to perform and raise funds. If our performance is good, I hope everyone will support us. If there are still some shortcomings, thank you for your applause and encouragement." Poplar Fruit pulled Kong Kong and bowed together. Many of the audience immediately applauded enthusiastically. Chapter 1439. To be honest, Yang Guo wasn't a good host. The jokes he used to stir up the crowd wouldn't have any effect if it were someone else. But when he and Kong Kong stood there, no matter what they said, there would be people cheering. They hadn't even started singing. The plate in front of them was filled with money. Kong Kong happily took it back, poured it into a bag, and then put it out. At this time, Kong Kong seemed to be less nervous because he had money. "Today we're here to do charity." Poplar Fruit briefly explained the purpose of singing. "The money we raise today will be donated to the charity fund under the name of, Where Are We Going, Dad?" There's a video as proof. As soon as he finished speaking, there was another round of thunderous applause, and even more cash being shoved at him. Of course, everyone's lives were better now, but not to the extent that they were all nouveau riche. Most of the money they donated was not more than 20 yuan. However, for Kong Kong, 20 yuan and 100 yuan were not much different. He was so happy that his mouth stretched to the back of his ears. "Since we're recording, where are we going, Dad? Let's sing the theme song first," Poplar Fruit said to the audience with a smile. He pulled Kong Kong over and asked with concern, "How is it? Are you ready? Let's start." Kong Kong nodded her head vigorously. Poplar Fruit played the accompaniment music on his phone. The sound came out through the speakers in the suitcase through the audio cable. The familiar prelude made many of the "Where Are We Going, Dad?" fans softly hum together. The "Where Are We Going, Dad?" program had a very good audience base all over the country, not to mention many uncles and aunties with children in the audience. The opening was French, which was one of the specialties of this season's "Where Are We Going, Dad?" However, since Nuoyu wasn't there, his part was sung by Kong Kong. Of course, Kong Kong couldn't speak French. Poplar Fruit wrote a transliteration and pinyin on the paper, so that he could read it out. Although it wasn't accurate, it wasn't like no one could understand it. It was precisely because no one understood the song that no one pointed out whether it was good or bad. Instead, they were applauded and encouraged. As Kong Kong sang, his eyes darted back and forth between the prompts and the crowd. It was obvious that his nervousness was gradually fading. Everyone laughed softly as they listened to Poplar Fruit, and Kong Kong gradually get into the groove. They began to sing a familiar part of the song. Dad, Dad, where are we going? As long as I'm here, you're not afraid of anything. Baby, baby, I'm your big tree. I'll accompany you to watch the sunrise for the rest of my life. This song had been with the audience all over the country since the first season 2 years ago. Although the lyrics had been slightly adjusted over the past 3 seasons, this part would never change. Seeing that there were quite a few audience members humming softly, Poplar Fruit had an idea and shouted, "Everyone, let's do it together. Dad, Dad, where are we going? As long as I'm here, you're not afraid of anything. Baby, baby, I'm your big tree. I'll accompany you to watch the sunrise for the rest of my life." At first, only a few people joined in the chorus, but when the most smooth lyrics were sung, almost everyone in the audience hummed in unison. This effect also covered up Poplar Fruit's defect of being easily out of tune when singing. After the song was sung, the audience applauded like thunder again. The atmosphere of the scene was fully aroused at this time. "What song are we going to sing next?" Poplar Fruit asked with a smile while holding the microphone. Of course, he was looking at Kong Kong, wanting him to take the initiative. However, the audience was very enthusiastic about the song, and soon they gave a lot of opinions. Heavenly Road. This auntie had good taste, but it was not Kong Kong's favorite. Go 4 Directions. This uncle's song was too retro, wasn't it? Uncle Han Lei, who was of the same age as Kong Kong's father, sang this song. Poplar Fruit had only heard of it before, and Kong Kong had never even heard of it before. Jiangnan Style. In the crowd, someone shouted. Poplar Fruit, who was wiping his cold sweat, suddenly became energetic. "Okay, let's sing Jiangnan Style." Poplar Fruit stood up with a smile and pulled Kong Kong up. This song was something that Yang Guo and the others had prepared beforehand. It was mainly because it was very popular. When it was popular, the streets and alleys were all playing this song. Even now, it was still widely sung, especially by children. Later, I'll sing the Korean part. Kong Kong, when you reach the key part, you'll sing Opaganon style, okay? Poplar Fruit smiled and said. Then, are there any friends in the audience who are willing to come up and dance with us? Soon Poplar Fruit pulled a tourist brother from the crowd. This brother was very fat and looked like Uncle Bird. Then he found a pair of sunglasses for him. The surrounding audience laughed. Don't laugh, don't laugh. Let's cheer for Uncle Bird. Poplar Fruit saw that the fake Uncle Bird brother and Kong Kong were a little nervous. He smiled and waved at the audience, saying, Later, if you know how to sing, just sing along, okay? The explosive music was transmitted from the phone to the stereo. Suddenly, the slightly cold atmosphere in the venue was ignited again. It couldn't be helped. This song was so addictive. Even if you didn't do anything, just listening to the song made you want to dance. It was time to start singing. Poplar Fruit picked up the microphone. When Poplar Fruit opened his mouth, everyone was shocked. It wasn't that he was out of tune. The lyrics were a little like a rap song. Poplar Fruit read it out as if he was reading a book. How could he be out of tune? What shocked everyone was that Poplar Fruit spoke in Korean. It was just like how they usually listen to Uncle Bird sing on the computer. No one could tell, but this feeling couldn't be ignored. Poplar Fruit was a pure Chinese. Listening to Poplar Fruit singing, whether it was good or not aside, just the fact that he sang the lyrics so accurately was enough to make everyone applaud him. Of course, not everyone liked Korean. The real climax of the atmosphere was when Kong Kong sang the line, Opaganon style, under Poplar Fruit's hand gestures. The fake Uncle Bird brother was in the middle while Poplar Fruit and Kong Kong danced on both sides. The cheers, laughter, and applause almost blew up the entire market. More and more people gathered around. Some even ran to the top of the nearby tea house and leaned against the railings to watch Poplar Fruit and Kong Kong's performance. Kong Kong, who was originally very nervous, was infected by the enthusiasm of the surrounding audience. Her shy limbs gradually relaxed, and she danced with all her might. The coldness on her face gradually disappeared, and was replaced by a smile. When she helped others, she felt a joy that she had never experienced before. Of course, she had to treat it with a smile. Chapter 1440. The crowd was very enthusiastic about donating. From time to time, there would be people squeezing to the front to donate money. Later, when they saw that Kong Kong was too busy tidying up the money, a shop owner helped pass a plastic bucket to him. Kong Kong, come on. Kong Kong, come on. Everyone's enthusiasm did not diminish. Seeing that Kong Kong was finally free, they clamored for Kong Kong to sing. Luckily, Poplar Fruit and Kong Kong were already prepared. After discussing for a while, the cold and aloof President Kong could not resist everyone's enthusiastic invitation. He finally nodded and took the microphone from Poplar Fruit. Then he squeezed in front of Poplar Fruit, and with a serious expression he was ready to start singing. He was still under a lot of pressure because this time, he would be singing alone. Although there would be some original vocals in the accompaniment, Poplar Fruit would not sing with him. The little boy was not used to being like my daughter. When nervous, he had to look for someone to rely on. He used his serious expression to try to hide his nervousness. Remember what I told you before? Poplar Fruit whispered in his ear, "Big watermelon, big watermelon." Poplar Fruit had told Kong Kong before that it was okay to be nervous and not to be afraid. As long as you imagine all the heads looking at you as big watermelons, then you won't be nervous. Of course, Kong Kong did not have such powerful skills. However, what Poplar Fruit said at this moment hit Kong Kong's cute spot. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly as if he was amused but did not dare to laugh. Suddenly, the nervousness was reduced by half. However, he was still nervous. When the original song started, Kong Kong was still half a beat slower. Say, "I'm very clean." I don't want to say, "I'm very safe." A very soft and clean tune, with the original song's naivety and Kong Kong's seriousness slowly brushed past people's hearts. Everyone suddenly realized that it was this song. I don't want to say I'm a chicken. It had been a long time since they heard it, right? This song came into being when the bird flu was rampant in 2005. At that time, the MV used the perspective of a chicken to ridicule the disaster caused by the bird flu. It was so cute that many netizens at that time fell in love with it. Of course, there was no concept of cute at that time. When Kong Kong said that she wanted to sing this song, Poplar Fruit was a little surprised, because this song was not from Kong Kong's era. Kong Kong wasn't even born when the song became popular, when the popularity died down, and when the song fell silent. However, Poplar Fruit could roughly guess why. Hu Jun's family had another daughter, Jiu. She was much older than Kong Kong. When the song became popular, Jiu was probably 4 or 5 years old. It was understandable that she liked the song. As for Kong Kong, she was naturally led astray by her elder sister. However, the original singer of this song, Kwa, sang it too deeply into people's hearts. That clear, clean, cute, and slightly aggrieved voice was definitely the best interpretation of this song. Kong Kong's voice sounded a little too mature. If they were to evaluate it individually, Kong Kong, who was used to being serious, would definitely sing average. Even Yonggwa felt that he might ruin the song. However, he sang very seriously, and at that moment, under everyone's gaze, he sang with full concentration. His body swayed gently, just like the affectionate little yellow chick in the music video. Surprisingly, Kong Kong's slightly strict singing style actually gave people a feeling of cuteness when compared to the original singer's style. Before this, who would have thought that the cold and aloof President Kong would sing such a cute song? However, he sang it, and he sang it quite well. "Eat my meat." Poplar Fruit came in front of Kong Kong at the right time. Facing the microphone, he added the original music video's background sound cutely, "Eat our meat." Suddenly, the audience roared with laughter. I have no objections. Kong Kong was not used to it, but he continued singing. We have no objections. Poplar Fruit raised his hand, and a few smart audience members followed suit. Take my eggs. Take our eggs. Poplar Fruit ran out, raised his hands, and led the audience in shouting. I'm willing to. Kong Kong couldn't help but smile, because the whole audience was dubbing for him. We're willing to. This kind of dubbing that sounded like dialogue was so cute that the audience and the whole country's audience couldn't help but want it. Same chicken, same egg. Finally, it was the high notes. Kong Kong didn't sing very well, but at that moment, no one cared about how he sang. The laughter and applause kept cheering him on. Kong Kong also threw his shyness to the back of his mind. In such a warm atmosphere, he swayed with the music and sang with all his might. Let's not talk about Kong Kong's singing. His current state of singing really surprised and delighted all of President Kang's fans. Yes, they really liked Kong Kong's cold and aloof personality and the warmth hidden under it, but they also wouldn't reject Kong Kong's fun and crazy songs from time to time. Didn't this make their idol more down-to-earth? After Kong Kong finished singing this song, it was as if he had lost all his strength. He leaned in Poplar Fruit's arms and didn't want to move. Although the audience was shouting encore, he really didn't have the strength to sing another song. Poplar Fruit stood up and smiled as he sang an English song for the audience. It was Linkin Park's What I've Done. Just looking at the name of the song, many people were probably confused, but when the prelude started, many of the young people present, including Kong Kong who was in Poplar Fruit's arms, became excited. Transformers. Transformers. Poplar Fruit's singing wasn't very good. He also sang along with the original singer. Otherwise he would have been out of tune, and not just slightly out of tune, but out of tune. But it could be heard that his pronunciation was very clear. It was no different from the original singer's pronunciation. It didn't matter if they didn't understand, but when they heard the exciting climax, what I've done, I'll face myself to cross out what I've become. Almost everyone cheered. That's right, everyone had heard this classic song before. Everyone knew this section that made their blood boil. Poplar Fruit didn't sing well, but he almost sang himself to tears because this song was too classic. At this moment, the singing reminded him of the time when he watched Transformers 1, with a group of good friends, including Song Ji-wen. Back then, a group of good friends drank on the side of the road, and sang this song together on the school road. They were all English majors, so it wasn't strange that they could sing these lyrics. Now, except for Song Ji-wen, the other brothers had already gone their separate ways. Well, there was no need to drag everyone down into the heavy memories. Poplar Fruit's song had a good effect, but it was an English song after all. After all, it was a song that only young people liked. The effect wasn't as good as before. So it was better to end with the theme song, Where Are You Going, Dad? Poplar Fruit pulled up Kong Kong, who was full of vitality. Chapter 1441. How is it? Isn't this the coolest thing you've ever done? Finally, Poplar Fruit and Kong Kong's singing journey came to a perfect end. But they didn't stop. Under the witness of the program crew, they took the bucket of money they had collected and went straight to the nearest bank. The bank staff helped them count their earnings that morning. Poplar Fruit took advantage of this time to sit in the small office provided by the bank manager with Kong Kong. They chatted while eating the lunch prepared by the program crew. It was already past lunchtime. Perhaps it was because he was too hungry, or because the process of completing the mission in the morning was too crazy and exciting. Kong Kong had a big smile on his face as he ate. He didn't even need Poplar Fruit to feed him. No, Kong Kong's answer was a bit unbelievable. Of course, looking at his snickering face, Poplar Fruit knew that wasn't the case at all. Why? Poplar Fruit asked with a smile. Because your singing is too bad. Kong Kong shrunk his neck and shook his head in disdain. Hey, you little brat. Poplar Fruit felt Kong Kong's pulse and knew that this little guy wasn't a normal child. He smiled and shook his head. Just as he was about to say something, he raised his head and saw the bank staff come in with a money order. Done counting. Poplar Fruit asked happily, how much is it? Kong Kong was very lively at that time. He skipped out with his chopsticks and took the money order from the bank staff. Let me see. How much? Kong Kong, read it out for everyone. Poplar Fruit laughed. However, the numbers on the money order made Kong Kong a little dizzy. He shook his head and ran into Poplar Fruit's arms. He leaned against Poplar Fruit and treated him as his father. Then he raised the money order high and said, "You read it out." Poplar Fruit glanced at it and said happily, "Wow, so much? $1,686.00. It was indeed a lot. They had only sung for slightly more than an hour, and most of the onlookers were Chinese tourists. They tipped so much because of their fame. According to the data of the hundreds of people at the scene, each person donated more than 30 yuan. That was not a small number in China. "That's great. Let's donate it all." Kong Kong couldn't wait to urge Poplar Fruit. The bank staff was already prepared. Poplar Fruit took the pen and wrote the charity funds account and the donor's name. Then he handed the money order to Kong Kong. He pointed at it and said, "Here, sign your names here." Kong Kong still knew how to write his own name. He wrote it in a crooked manner, then handed the money order to the photographer, who took a few pictures. Finally, he asked the bank staff to send the money order over. "Uncle Yanghua, can the money we donated today help them?" Kong Kong asked. "Yes," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "With so much money, it's enough to buy 2 new computers and help at least 2 children from poor mountainous areas to join in remote teaching." "Only 2," Kong Kong said regretfully. "You think it's not enough?" Poplar Fruit was happy. He touched Kong Kong's watermelon skin hair and said, "When it comes to charity, we can't calculate your contribution by the amount. A person's ability is limited, not to mention that you don't have the ability to make money on your own. Am I right? And when it comes to charity, you have to do what you can. Isn't that what the song says? As long as everyone gives a little bit of love, the world will become a beautiful world." Poplar Fruit said, "If you give your love, then many people will give their love. Then many children will be able to go to school and live a good life." Kong Kong nodded, not fully understanding. On the other side, Kiki's special training ended earlier than theirs. An hour ago, Zhou Shimin and the little girl had finished the special training in the morning. Kiki's performance was naturally very outstanding. Zhou Shimin couldn't wait to give her a future star trophy on the spot. They sat next to the boxing ring and opened the lunchboxes sent by the program crew. The lunchboxes were packed in 2 insulated boxes, so naturally, they were also very sumptuous. Now that Zhou Shimin had a daughter, he had forgotten about his son. He praised the sumptuous lunch loudly, completely unaware of the pain his son had gone through under Lin Yongjian's leadership. For lunch, he could only eat cucumbers and tomatoes, which he hated the most. It was so good to have a daughter who loved to smile. Kiki sat next to him, smiling like a flower. She sniffed and smelled the fragrance of the meat. She licked her lips, intoxicated and looking forward to it. Zhou Shimin looked at her, and was a little jealous of Poplar Fruit's good luck. While eating, Zhou Shimin looked at the radish beef brisket in Kiki's hand and said, "Give me a piece of beef. I want to try yours. It's super delicious." Kiki had a lot of fun with Zhou Shimin's father that day, so of course she was happy to share her food. The little girl giggled and carefully picked up a piece of beef brisket and placed it directly in front of Zhou Shimin. Zhou Shimin was a little surprised. He didn't expect to be treated so happily. He carefully took a bite of the beef brisket without touching Kiki's chopsticks. Delicious. Delicious. Zhou Shimin wasn't exaggerating. It was already delicious, and then Kiki gave it to him, so the taste was even better. Kiki ate very quickly. She had been practicing martial arts for the whole morning. She didn't complain about the hardship or tiredness, but she still sweated a lot and consumed a lot of energy, so she was hungry. After eating, Kiki couldn't sit still. She walked around and then asked Zhou Shimin, "Uncle Zhou, when can we see my father?" Zhou Shimin said soon. "He's taking your brother Kong Kong to do a task. He'll probably come back when he's done. And you have to work hard to defeat Xianxian. If you defeat Xianxian, you'll be able to see your father sooner." Kiki nodded. She twisted her arms and said, "But I think Xianxian is very strong. I can't beat him." The little girl had seen Xuanxuan's indomitable kung fu. At that time, she thought that he was very strong. Now that it was her turn to fight with him, Kiki was a little nervous. Don't be afraid. He can't beat you, Zhou Shimin said. He secretly thought in his heart. Later, I have to tell that boy not to be cruel to girls. A man who hits a girl is destined to be lonely for the rest of his life. Uncle Zhou, let's continue to practice martial arts, okay? Kiki said excitedly. I want to see my father as soon as possible. The little girl had already put on one of the boxing gloves. She took the other one to Zhou Shimin and asked him to help her put it on. Okay, of course. Chapter 1442. When Poplar Fruit and Kong Kong returned to the boxing gym, there were already many children gathered there. It seemed that Poplar Fruit and Kong Kong had indeed wasted some time chatting with the children from the mountain area. But reuniting after such a long time was indeed delightful. Kiki couldn't wait for Zhou Shimin to carry her down from the boxing ring. Then, she spread her long legs and ran towards her father. She was still wearing her head protector, so she stiffly plunged into her father's embrace. Did you miss Daddy? Poplar Fruit hugged the little girl, and his face bloomed like a flower. This was a heartfelt joy that he hadn't felt even when he was with Kong Kong. After all, this was his own daughter. How could there be such a happy hug at the last minute? Super miss. Kiki hugged her father's neck and gestured for him to squat down. She giggled and said, Today I learned boxing from Xian Xian's daddy. Oh really? You know how to box? Poplar Fruit laughed and said, Demonstrate for Daddy. Kiki obeyed. She clenched her big boxing gloves and punched towards her father. Her voice was very clear as she said, This is a straight punch. This is a left hook. Wait, you clearly used a right punch. How did it become a left hook? Poplar Fruit smiled as he grabbed the little fist on his face and shook it. Oh okay, this is a right hook. This is a real left hook. Chi-Chi threw a punch and hit her father's face right in the middle. Poplar Fruit cried out and fell to the ground. He reached out and shouted, You're so strong. Even I was defeated by you. The little girl happily giggled. She ran over and pulled her father up and said, I didn't use any strength. Hee. When Kong Kong arrived, he couldn't help but walk towards his father. Hu Jun had already brought Nuoi back. When he saw his son, he laughed and said, How was it? You followed your uncle Poplar Fruit. Not bad. Kong Kong nodded proudly, but the expression on her face said, Come and ask me. I heard that you guys went to sing on the streets? Hu Jun patted his son's head and asked in a professional manner. In fact, he was indeed curious. He knew his son's character. How was this kid the kind of person who would run in front of others and shout? Hu Jun was very curious. How did Poplar Fruit deal with Kong Kong? We're going to sing for money, Kong Kong explained unhappily. Singing for a living? Hu Jun's understanding was still based on the mission card when they first parted ways. Yes, we even earned more than 1,000 yuan. Look, Kong Kong couldn't remember the final number, so he could only vaguely give a rough estimate. He proudly showed his father the receipt of the money transfer after the donation. This small piece of paper was carefully folded in his trouser pocket. What is this? Hu Jun took it and looked at it carefully. Only then did he realize that it was a receipt for a remittance and a donation. You donated the money. Who did you donate it to? At this time, Kong Kong proudly told his father about their experience that morning. The more Hu Jun listened, the more surprised he became. In the end, he didn't know what to say. He just gave his son a thumbs up and said, Good job. You're good. When I heard that he used the money he earned from singing to donate to the children in the poor mountainous areas, I was very touched. After Hu Jun accepted the interview, he laughed and said, Really, I didn't expect Poplar Fruit to be able to guide him so well. Konger's character is a bit introverted. If you asked him to sing in public, he wouldn't be willing. Hu Jun analyzed, he would feel embarrassed. But Poplar Fruit used another method to let him see the meaning of singing on the streets. Although it was embarrassing, he was more willing to help others. I think Konger's enthusiasm is commendable. Hu Jun added. Of course, Poplar Fruit's method is also very, very good. No wonder he became a teacher and professor at such a young age. There's a reason for all of this. Hu Jun was very satisfied with his son's performance, So much so that when Poplar Fruit came over to talk to him about Kong Kong's excellent performance in the morning, he couldn't stop smiling. Of course, in front of Poplar Fruit, he still had to be reserved. Wuxia waved his hand and said, "This is what he should do. If he doesn't want to, I'll beat him up later." Who said I don't want to? Kong Kong was unhappy. He twisted his body to avoid his father's big hand and said unhappily, "When I sang, everyone applauded. A lot of people sang with me. I can prove that." Poplar Fruit clapped his hands and laughed. The song he sang, "I Don't Want to Say I'm a Chicken," was really fun. He learned that song from his sister. Jun laughed happily. After returning to the stage, Kiki made the final preparations under Zhou Shimin's lead. Of course, Xianxian also went on stage. While Poplar Fruit came over to talk to Kiki, Zhou Shimin took the opportunity to bring Xianxian to the side and discuss with him. "Xianxian, later on you will lose to Kiki's sister, okay?" Zhou Shimin and his son sat in a corner of the boxing ring and said. "Why?" Xianxian asked, puzzled. "I can beat her." On the boxing ring, Xianxian had an unyielding spirit. This might have been inherited from his father, but sometimes, he didn't know how to stop at the right time like his father. "Why?" Zhou Shimin looked at his son with a shocked and helpless expression and said unhappily, "You're a boy. You don't want to lose to a girl?" In fact, there was another sentence that Zhou Shimin didn't say, because there was a camera recording it. If he said it out loud, it would be too obvious. "You like Kiki's sister so much. If you make her cry, what if she doesn't like you in the future? Come on. I believe that you will. Come here." Zhou Shimin waved his hand and put on the head protection for his son. "Okay, then I will let her win." Xianxian said in a childish voice. Now was the time to calm down, so Xianxian didn't care too much. On the other side, Poplar Fruit also reminded Kiki, "Kiki, remember father's words. When you fight with Xianxian later, don't use all your strength, okay?" Others didn't know, but how could Poplar Fruit not know? Kiki's strength surpassed most untrained children under the age of 10. This was also why Poplar Fruit only taught her the basics of boxing. If he taught her more powerful techniques, such as Xingyi boxing, even an adult wouldn't be able to withstand one punch. "You are the big sister, you can't hurt your little brother," Poplar Fruit said. "But I think Xianxian is stronger than me." Kiki looked at her father with a puzzled expression. Poplar Fruit shrugged and said with a smile, "Friendship first, competition second. Anyway, you should pay attention to your strength, okay?" "Okay." Kiki went on stage in a daze. Chapter 1443. The audience was in the zone, cheering for Kiki. They couldn't help it. After all, Princess Kiki was a girl. The atmosphere was good, so Zhou Shimin pulled the two kids to the middle of the ring and said, "Salute each other first." Xianxian cupped his fists and bowed, and Chi-Chi imitated him and bowed as well. The little girl was even smiling happily. There was no seriousness before a big fight. At that moment, the audience in front of the TV didn't think that the two kids would really fight. After all, everyone knew Kiki's personality. She was definitely my daughter, just like her appearance. Xianxian had been an admirer of Kiki's sister since the first episode. It was hard to imagine the two of them punching each other. However, what happened next shocked them greatly. After Zhou Shimin shouted, Kiki and Xianxian began to fight. At first, they tried to punch each other. At that time, Xianxian still remembered his father saying, "If your sister hits you, let her hit you, but you can't hit her." Kiki also remembered her father telling her not to hit Xianxian with too much strength. The two of them moved around for a while, and Kiki's interest was piqued. She gradually found the feeling of learning from Xianxian's father in the morning. She began to use the moves she learned. Kiki was still a beginner when it came to boxing. Although she learned quickly in the morning, it was undeniable that it was impossible for a little girl to use the moves as she wished. It was as if she knew how to disassemble the moves, but couldn't use them in a coherent manner. She punched once and then pulled back. Xianxian knew how to dodge, but he couldn't. On one hand, it was because his chubby body was still a little clumsy. On the other hand, the tall Chi-Chi had long legs and arms. She was able to quickly catch up with him and lightly hit Xianxian's head protector with her fist. I got it. Chi-Chi turned her head around happily, waving her arms and shouting at her father. Poplar Fruit also gave his daughter a thumbs up. Kiki reached the end of her arm when she reached, so she didn't use much strength. The audience below the stage cheered as they supported Chi-Chi on one side, while falling to the ground on the other. But for Xianxian, it was a bit ironic. Shouldn't a boxer be chasing victory and cheering in the boxing ring? Why did he have to give in? At that time, Xianxian was a little unconvinced. Then Xianxian was hit by Chi-Chi's hook twice in a row. The stubbornness in his heart that he couldn't suppress began to take over his rationality. Xianxian was going to fight back. Without any warning, Zhou Shimin was still beaming with joy, thinking that his son knew how to conduct himself. In the end, Xianxian didn't dodge this time. He rushed towards Chi-Chi and threw a left hook and a right hook. Xianxian's posture was perfect, just like the boxing matches people saw on TV. Kiki also raised her fist, but she was a little slower. In the end, she was hit by Xianxian's 3 consecutive punches on the protective gear on her head. She was hit so hard that she couldn't find her bearings. This posture was quite frightening. Poplar Fruit couldn't help but take 2 steps forward when Xianxian raised his hand. He almost jumped to save Kiki, but he still kept his rationality. After seeing that Kiki was fine after being hit 3 times, he was relieved. It wasn't that Xianxian didn't have a lot of strength, but he still needed to tiptoe to reach Chi-Chi. His lower body wasn't stable, and almost half of his strength was wasted in the process of punching. Also, with the protective gear, Kiki only felt that she was hit 3 times. She wasn't injured. At that moment, their fighting spirit was aroused. Kiki and Xianxian both became serious. Zhou Shimin's reaction was a little slower, so Xianxian and Kiki were entangled. In an instant, the two of them exchanged blows. However, Xianxian was a boy after all, and he had been practicing boxing since he was young. His fists swung like he was hitting a wooden stake. His fists rained down on Kiki's little head. Kiki had just returned a punch, but Xianxian's consecutive punches disrupted her formation. Xianxian's attacks were too fierce, and Kiki couldn't find a chance to fight back. Moreover, Kiki could only dodge and block with her hands. She couldn't think of a counterattack. Okay, slow down. Don't hit girls. Zhou Shimin, the referee on the stage, quickly shouted. Xianxian's eyes were red, and he didn't remember his father's words. Seeing that Xianxian had already beaten Chi-Chi to the point where she could only run, Zhou Shimin suddenly had an idea. She suddenly knelt down and hugged her son with both hands. She then shouted, Chi-Chi hit. The audience were all laughing their heads off. The netizens expressed their dissatisfaction. They had seen children who were unlucky, but they had never seen a father who was unlucky. Zhou Shimin, as a master, you are more attentive than a father. Also, is there a referee who is biased like you? Chi-Chi stared blankly for a moment, then her face lit up with joy. She hurriedly jumped back in 2 or 3 steps. Poplar Fruit's reaction was faster. He felt the small muscles bulging under his daughter's clothes. This little girl, after being beaten so many times, she couldn't help but use more strength this time. But that couldn't be done. If Kiki used all her strength, something bad would happen. He quickly shouted, Kiki, don't use your strength. Kiki had already made her move. Halfway through, she heard her father's shout. She subconsciously held back her strength, but her punch was still very fast. It landed on Xianxian's protective gear like a cannonball. Even the camera below could hear the muffled bang sound. For the second punch, Kiki seemed to realize that she had used too much strength. She embarrassedly stuck out her tongue and gently pushed Xianxian's head. Then Zhou Shimin quickly shouted, KO. But at this time, Xianxian, who was beaten up, suddenly burst into tears. Everyone could hear the sadness in his cries. Yes, of course he was sad. Being beaten up wasn't painful, but being beaten up by his father unwillingly. How could a 3 or 4-year-old Xianxian endure this kind of grievance? Poplar Fruit quickly said to his daughter, who was happily waving her little gloves as she ran towards him. You've beaten Xianxian to tears. Why aren't you comforting him? To be honest, Kiki had won, but Poplar Fruit wasn't very happy. Zhou Shimen's actions were equivalent to Kiki cheating. At this time, Kiki saw Xian crying very sadly. No matter how Zhou Shimen comforted him, it didn't seem to have any effect. She generously opened her arms and hugged Xian. Her voice was clear and sincere as she said, Xian, I'm sorry. Can you stop crying? Miraculously, Xian was still sobbing, but now that he was hugged by Kiki, his crying slowly stopped. Xian's hands hesitated for a moment before he slowly hugged Kiki. Perhaps at this moment, he understood why his father said in the interview, if you let her win, you won't win the applause of the audience. And the future. Of course, the winner wasn't Kiki's future. How could it be Kiki's future? Poplar Fruit was waiting there with a kitchen knife. Chapter 1444. Kiki and Xian's boxing match ended with both Kiki and Xian winning. The village chief's ability to smooth things over was not weak at all. Xian's eyes were still filled with tears, but when he came down, he received Kiki's considerate consolation. It could be considered a blessing in disguise. Zhou Shimen and Poplar Fruit watched from the side with smiles on their faces. Zhou Shimen said to Poplar Fruit, your daughter really has a talent for boxing. I only taught her once or twice for many moves, and she was able to learn them very well. That might be because she trains regularly. Poplar Fruit smiled modestly. I think, Poplar Fruit, if Xian wants to learn martial arts from you, why don't Kiki learn boxing from me? Zhou Shimen suggested with a smile. Ai, that's not bad. Lin Yongjian smiled and agreed. He did not mind watching the drama unfold. After Kiki learns boxing, she won't have to be afraid of her husband bullying her when she gets married. Hu Jun chuckled and agreed. That's right. If anyone dares to quarrel with Kiki, Kiki will punch them without a word. The world will be peaceful. Poplar Fruit chuckled and said, then I'll have to teach her not to bully others. A girl can't be so violent towards her husband. Boxing is fine for self-defense. Actually, Poplar Fruit was tactfully rejecting. How could he bear to let Kiki learn boxing? If the young lady was beaten black and blue, wouldn't Poplar Fruit's heart ache? Next, it was Nua Yi and Kong Kong's match. The two of them did not know any boxing moves, and could only rely on their instincts to wrestle with each other. In the end, the adults could only pull them apart, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. If they continued fighting, Nua Yi would probably cry again. The adult group also came twice for the match. Poplar Fruit and Zhou Shimen, Lu Yi and Hu Jun. The latter two fought first. Their actions were exaggerated, and their acting was shocking. Moves like a white crane spreading its wings and a dragon swinging its tail were thrown out randomly. It made everyone on and off the stage roll on the floor laughing. Poplar Fruit and Zhou Shimen's match was also a performance, but their acting was much more realistic. After all, they were both people with real martial arts. Poplar Fruit secretly signaled Zhou Shimen to attack quickly while he relied on his body's agility to dodge his punches. It looked like every punch was pushing Yang Guo to the brink of death, causing the audience to cry out in alarm. But in reality, nothing happened to the two of them. Zhou Shimen's fists repeatedly brushed past Poplar Fruit's protective gear. And when Poplar Fruit's fists landed on Zhou Shimen's body, they would leave without stopping. Zhou Shimen and Poplar Fruit also loved to act. The two of them would cry out in pain from time to time, but in reality, Zhou Shimen could not hit Poplar Fruit. And with the strength of Poplar Fruit's touch, he probably could not even kill a mosquito. Oh, all right. The village chief was scared out of his wits. He thought that the two of them had taken things too hard and hurriedly came forward to stop the fight. In his heart he grumbled, we are not in a real-life fighting program. Is there a need to be so competitive? But when he went forward to pull the two of them apart, everyone focused their eyes. Poplar Fruit and Zhou Shimen were standing there looking relaxed as they chuckled at each other. As for their looks, they did not show any signs of pain from being beaten up. Actually, we were not really fighting. We were just acting. Zhou Shimen said. The two of them performed their fighting moves together in slow motion. Zhou Shimen slowly threw a punch at Poplar Fruit, and at the moment when it was close to his cheek, Poplar Fruit had already turned his head and dodged it. Thinking back, everyone also realized that just now, they seemed to have only been shouting and cheering. They did not hear the sound of the boxing gloves hitting the body. The village chief did not know whether to laugh or cry as he patted the two of them. When it came to love acting, the two of them were even more exaggerated than the two old urchins from before. At night, after dinner, everyone went outside to enjoy the cool air. The film city at night was not as hot as it was in the morning. All the dads lined up in a row, ready to start playing the game. This game was similar to the previous trip, where the dads touched hands to recognize their wives. But this time it was the 5 kids. They had to wear blindfolds, touch their faces, and then find their fathers. However, the person they were looking for was not their own father, but the temporary father that they had laughed and worked hard to complete the task with today. Although this process made the real dads a little jealous, there were still many exciting scenes that made people convulse with laughter. For example, when Nuayi was searching, he touched Dejun. Dejun held it in for a while, then finally pushed Nuayi's hand away and said, "Nuayi, you touched the wrong person." Another example was when Xian and Dejun discussed that when it was his turn, Dejun would help identify him. But unexpectedly, Dejun was carried away by Zhou Shimin at the beginning. Xian stood there helplessly and shouted for Dejun for a long time, but no one responded. Also, the funniest ones were Kong and Dejun. The two of them wore blindfolds, and as they touched each other, they hugged each other. That look of camaraderie was simply unbearable to look at. Kong suddenly said, "Ah, my wife." That immediately poked at the crowd's laughing point. All the dads who were holding back their anger burst out laughing. Dejun also gave a passionate response, "Aya hubby." It seemed that the best newbie Lanyu couple was not Kong and Nuayi, but Kong and Dejun. It was now Kiki's turn. The little girl wore blindfolds, and she touched her left side to right side. In the middle, she stopped at her father's side. She gently pinched Poplar Fruit's chin and mouth, then giggled. I know this." Kiki could not see, so she turned her head to the air and pointed at Poplar Fruit as she said with a smile, "Are you sure that he is your father today?" The village chief walked over and asked. No, this is my papa." Chi giggled. "Not a temporary papa." Poplar Fruit's face bloomed with a smile. He was very satisfied with his daughter's performance. Although she was not looking for him, she was able to recognize his identity so quickly. This showed that the father and daughter were actually connected by heart. All right, Kiki was going to find her temporary papa. When she touched Zhou Shimin's face, Kiki pondered for a long time. She repeatedly touched Zhou Shimin's chin and pinched Zhou Shimin's mouth. Finally, Kiki could not contain her joy as she pointed at Zhou Shimin and said, It's him. Are you sure? Have you chosen? Are you not going to change it?" The village chief was still deliberately mystifying. Kiki hesitated for a moment, then touched his face again. Finally, she firmly nodded her head. It's him. I know, he has a beard here." After she took off her blindfold, she happily jumped into Zhou Shimin's arms and pointed at his chin. Zhou Shimin also liked such a cute little girl who loved to laugh. He hugged Kiki and shook her. After he let go of the little girl, he put his hand on Poplar Fruit's shoulder and said with envy, I also want a daughter." Poplar Fruit proudly patted Zhou Shimin's shoulder and said proudly, "Hurry up and have another one." These 2 months, Xiao Han's work has begun to become busy. This burden before the new year is not easy, so I can only write 2 chapters a day. However, this book is coming to an end. Xiao Han is working hard to write a different and complete ending. I hope that readers will continue to support me. Xiao Han is very grateful that you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.